there was a recommendation number 3, which was to adopt a CARES Act allocation and reporting framework. And actually items 14 and 28 would actually address that issue. And so what I would propose to do is go ahead and hear the speakers on both of those items. I understand that there's one group presentation and then 7 speakers that wish to speak on this item. And what we'll do is we'll allow the group presentation to have 10 minutes, and then each of the individual speakers will have 7 minutes each. So if there's no objection, I'll ask the clerk to go ahead and call up the group presentation first and then the individual speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're still waiting on members of the group to join, so at this, if it's all right with you, we'll start with the individual speakers. I would like to note that we received 8 e-comments on both of these items, item 14 and 28. We have 5 callers on the line to address the board. We'll be calling speakers by the last 4 digits of their phone number. You'll hear a notification that your call has been unmuted. Each caller will be asked to state their name for the audio record. And I would remind the public speakers that they should mute their TV or live video stream before they begin their comments. I'll turn it over to Aaron to call the first public speaker.
Yes, thank you. If you have not called in yet to the meeting and would like to address the board on item 14 or item 28, please do so at this time using the instructions you received when you submitted your request to speak. We'll begin with 3733.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Haney Hong. I'm president and CEO of the San Diego County Taxpayers Association, the region's 75-year-old taxpayer watchdog, municipal performance think tank. Let me first say thank you for your leadership during this crisis. These are certainly challenging times, testing our community's ability to band together to defeat this public health emergency. Thanks to also your executive staff under the great leadership there of Helen Robbins-Meyer for all the exceptional work done by the county. I also want to thank the region's mayors, some of whom I'm sure are listening in, and the city managers who are leading their respective communities. I've spoken with nearly all the mayors in the last 2 weeks, and certainly their challenges are daunting. Today, you're considering different approaches on how to provide resources for the various cities who are ineligible for CARES Act direct federal support. I want to suggest an approach that gives the cities resources they need in this crisis while also permitting the kinds of oversight and performance that taxpayers expect. We're concerned with how taxpayer dollars are spent, and we want to ensure that they're spent wisely. We know that different cities have different capacities for the resources that they have. These are consistent findings of previous SANDAG Transnet independent audits, and I think it's important that we move forward cautiously. I'll suggest that $20 million is a good starting point, but we also understand that as cities need to make decisions in times of crisis, we have to give folks, mayors, city managers, the benefit of the doubt without requiring plans up front. We also recommend that you leave open the option and the possibility of providing up to $50 million if these various cities, after perhaps the first tranche of taxpayer dollars that the county is able to provide, if they're able to demonstrate to you that they have expended their funds appropriately with the right measurements and performance that we would expect. I'll also point out that if a city has then appropriately, following this kind of structure, if a city has appropriately used the CARES Act money, then you'll be in a position to recognize strong municipal performance. So I know my time's up. I just want to point out again, thank you for your leadership. I think there's a couple different ways we could skin this cat, but I do think that the cities are in need of resources, and we just want to make sure that we get performance out of the resources that you might consider giving the various cities as they tackle this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mayor Rebecca Jones.
Thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity to address you today. County staff, along with all of our city staff, have risen to a significant challenge, and I appreciate all that you've done. Now is the time to assist our 17 cities that have not received any dollars to assist us during this unprecedented time to deal with COVID-19. We have all had great need during this and are having a difficult time navigating through this to serve our citizens like we always have. I also sent a letter that you all should have received. Anyway, I'd like to go over a few of the things that we have great need for in these times. We need this money to help us with law enforcement and other city oversight with respect to management enforcement of the county health orders, supporting our businesses in our community in the reopening process, the purchase of informational technology equipment to enhance telecommuting and more virtual business practices, purchasing, installation, and modification of city facilities to reduce potential spread of the virus, including such items as automated temperature reading devices, automated doors, physical barriers, and the like. Elevated cleaning and sanitizing activities. Full, part, or temporary staffing to encourage social distancing at city and non-city facilities. Development and dissemination of information to assist businesses to try to reopen and survive. Replenishment of PPE for first responders and other mission critical employees. And also providing additional mental health services, particularly for our employees that have worked so hard during this pandemic. Again, thank you for your consideration to support all of the cities in our county, all 17 of the cities that have not received one penny from this whole entire pandemic. We thank you for all that you do, and we thank you for your support, and we are all in this together. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll turn to our organized group presentation. The group will have a total of 10 minutes to address the board. All 3 members of the group must speak during that time, and please self-regulate your time. We'll start with 3640.
Hi, yes, my name is David Garcias. I'm the president of SEIU Local 221, and SEIU is a proud partner of the Invest in San Diego Families Coalition. SEIU supports the proposal brought forward by Supervisor Jacob and Supervisor Fletcher on utilizing funding from the Federal CARES Act. In particular, we think it makes sense to leverage state funding to get to our shared goal of $50 million to support our cities, $20 million from the county share, and $30 million from the state. With that in mind, we also hope that this board will support the HEROES Act, which has been passed by congressional leaders and is on to the U.S. Senate. If passed, it'll ensure that more federal money comes to local governments, your frontline employees that are safeguarding our community. By taking action today, you are dedicating millions of dollars to respond to COVID-19, and supporting your employees is integral to this work. Employees that are on the front line should receive hazard pay for the work that they have been doing and will continue to do until the crisis has passed. These are dedicated county workers that believe in the job that they do. The board should invest in their employees' financial security by ensuring pay equity for county employees and all employees. The board should continue to invest in improving public health, maintaining efficient public services by not cutting corners, and contracting work out to private entities. We urge you to approve the Jacob Fletcher proposal, continue to push for more state and federal money, and use this funding to support, protect, and invest in the county employees that are on the front lines every day. SEIU will help support that, and we will become a partner in getting that state and federal funding. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next group member is 6687.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Drusilla Willis. I'm a human service specialist with the Lemon Grove Family Resource Center. I'm also the San Diego County Chapter Chairperson for the County Employees Union, SEIU Local 221. Today, you are approving more than $300 million in federal money to support the COVID response. We're here to support that proposal from Supervisor Fletcher and Supervisor Jacob, and to once again tell you that this money should be spent to keep workers safe and to provide hazard pay to employees on the front lines. At the Lemon Grove Family Resource Center, we are told to tell customers that the FRCs are not open, even though they still are. We may not see a large amount of customers, but we do see some of the most vulnerable, including the homeless. Human service specialists still have to issue emergency EBT food assistance cards, give the homeless their mail, And we even have customers coming to the office for temporary and permanent homeless assistance. We do this while wearing very thin tubular bandanas that were issued by the county. And there's another issue I wanted to address as well.
I just received an email from
I was
you.
disturbed by the somebody talking.
Is that all right?
I was disturbed by the comments made. Okay. I was disturbed by the comments made by Chairman Cox and Supervisor Desmond and Supervisor Gaspar during the hazard pay item during last Tuesday's meeting. To call employees angels from God and then say we don't deserve hazard pay doesn't recognize the fact that we must be safe to keep the public safe. And for Supervisor Gaspar to ask if employees are in harm's way seems to show a lack of understanding of the kind of work we do to keep the public safe and to support them. And in closing, please vote yes on the Jacob Fletcher proposal and use this money to invest in hazard pay and reimburse employees for the extra costs from working from home, including electricity, internet service, and some had to purchase laptops, etc., so we can better serve the communities we are part of and we live in. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final member of the group is 7448.
My name is Rachel. Good afternoon. My name is Rachel, and I'm a proud 8-year county employee, and currently I work at Polinsky Children's Center as a residential care worker supervisor. Recently, this past week, which would be yesterday, we found out that we've had 2 more cases diagnosed at Polinsky, which brings our total of 3 individuals who have the COVID virus. Children come in. Many of the social workers expect that they might have the COVID-19, but due to staffing and nursing issues, the children are not tested, so they're just brought in, exposing all staff. We work directly with these children and are given very thin cloth masks as our only protection. Today, you are approving $300 million in federal funding to support the COVID response. We are here to support this proposal of Supervisor Fletcher, Supervisor Jacob, and to once again tell you that this money should be spent to keep employees like me and others, my coworkers, safe so that we can keep our community safe, pay for more safety equipment, and provide hazardous pay to employees on the front line. Frontline employees are stepping up to the challenge of this COVID pandemic, but we are not going to continue to sacrifice our safety to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 0110 or 0111.
Good morning. My name is Jose Lopez. I'm an organizer with ACE, the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, and a proud member of the Invest in San Diego Families Coalition. I was the unofficial translator for the county earlier. I want to add that I'm disappointed in your response to our community members' testimonies during item number 5. All of you failed to acknowledge the pain and suffering that our people are facing. It is clear that you have no idea how it feels to be on the verge of being evicted and ending up homeless. By your failure to respond to our community members, you are sending the message that you don't care. I live in San Isidro, one of the hardest hit areas by the pandemic, and wanted to make sure you heard from us about how we're being impacted. I'm calling in to support the ISDF demands, including the ACLU's Equity Task Force. As local elected officials responding to this pandemic, your efforts must be rooted in our shared values of fairness and justice. We need to make sure that we put people first, not economics. If you really care about the economy, invest in protecting tenants, workers, low-income families by supporting the ISDF demands. This virus continues to highlight the gross inequalities of our system. We have people calling in who are more concerned about reopening golf courses and getting their haircuts than human lives. We have wealthy county board of supervisors, the same ones who voted in favor of giving themselves a raise less than a year ago, voting against paying their own county workers hazard pay during the worst virus this county has ever seen. The communities hardest hit by this virus are also those with least access to healthcare, most rent burden, least stable housing situations, and are where there are more low-income workers, those that you call essential but don't compensate accordingly. I urge you to use your political powers as county supervisors to protect our communities. I urge you to cancel rent and mortgages to make sure no one has to choose between food or rent. We need also to strengthen our county moratorium in the meantime to cover all evictions, not just those related to COVID-19, and extend the payback period as much as possible. We also need to invest in tenant counseling services to make sure tenants can be informed of their rights and can protect themselves from slumlords and abusive landlords. No one should be evicted during this pandemic, regardless if the eviction was filed before the lockdown, because eviction equals death. The county is counting on you, and you have the power to make decisions that will save lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is the mayor of National City, Alejandro Sotelo Solis.
Good afternoon, and thank you. This is Alejandra Sotelo Solis, Mayor of the City of National City. Chairman Cox and County Supervisors, thank you for bringing forward Agenda Item 14 regarding the CARES allocation. As you know, cities like ours is not receiving any CARES Act funding. However, it is an important first step as we start down the long road of recovery for our tax base and restoring services. We will continue to work on the front lines of this pandemic alongside the county's response. And unfortunately, we are doing so without resources to support those efforts. We support your proposal to allocate CARES Act funding to the 17 cities and ask you for 3 additional items. 1, to consider an equity factor for funding for cities with higher case volumes. 2, create a task force to help guide the rest of the funding. 3, provide additional zip code data regarding where tests are being administered and where deaths are taking place. Many in our community are concerned. We are the essential workers, and National City is disproportionately affected with the highest rate of 483 cases per 100,000 population. This represents 5.1% of the cases countywide, while we are only approximately 2% of the county population. We propose that you allocate the CARES Act fund by utilizing the percentage of cases countywide rather than the per capita formula being proposed. If we are all in this together, we need to provide resources and provide financial support to those areas most in need or those considered hotspots. This would put the resources directly on the front lines when they are needed to help resolve those equity issues. Second, we would like to encourage our county colleagues to create an equity task force that provides recommendations on how to disseminate the rest of the $300 million. Lastly, as data-driven decision makers, we need more data that is specific to our zip codes. Information that we are asking for is 1, the number of tests taking place in our respective communities via zip codes. 2, what the average time wait for an individual to request COVID-19 to actual testing time is. 3, how many deaths via ethnicity have taken place from our zip codes? And lastly, identify how many of our elders or employees from skilled nursing facilities have tested positive in our respective zip code areas. Thank you again for your leadership in this matter. And remember that those underserved communities really need your support. Again, if we are all in this together, we must and need to protect our most vulnerable. Again, with this data, it will benefit all, including those who are drumming to the beat to open up, because it will demonstrate the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 and how those wishing to open up can slow down to help us, to help the most vulnerable of our county, elders, essential workers, and those immunocompromised. Thank you so much. We appreciate your consideration and would be happy to discuss with you if you have any questions. On behalf of the City of National City, thank you so much to my colleagues, Board of Supervisors.
Thank you. Our final speaker on these 2 items is 5192.
Hello, Board of Supervisors. This is Reverend Shane Harris, the president and founder of the People's Alliance for Justice. We're representing hundreds of our members across the county of San Diego and even more hundreds of our members across the state of California. And the over 2,500 foster children in our San Diego County child welfare system. The reality is that across the state, 13,000 foster kids nearly in foster care in the state of California and nearly 2,500 in the county of San Diego. All of the recommendations brought before you or concerns are valid prior to me speaking. However, let me be very clear that our children in child welfare must be a critical piece of all of this discussion. My understanding is that the $334 million, that there's a $2 million delegation hoping or appropriation hoping to go into child welfare services. I have sent a letter to all of you in regard to this matter. And as a member of the Child and Family Strengthening Advisory Board of our county, the county's advisory board on child welfare issues, as well as the president of the People's Alliance for Justice, I'm giving you these 3 recommendations. Supervisor Fletcher and the Board of Supervisors, I've asked you, 1, to only approve this funding if we can meet the recommendations of the people, all the people prior to me and us now. 1, I'm asking that this Child and Family Strengthening Advisory Board of the county would get a chance to analyze the $2 million. $2 million would be delegated or appropriated to child welfare, but only under the guidance of the San Diego Child and Family Strengthening Advisory Board, giving recommendations on where that money should be used. 2, I've asked that the funding that goes into all of these areas, but particularly into child welfare, CARES Act funding for child welfare services would go to providing expanded outreach services and supports, but it's allocated towards grassroots, culturally relevant, and non-traditional service providers who are embedded in communities disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. And so the ask today is that you would really think hard about the way that this funding is being used. This is not a political issue. This is why I'm neutral on the CARES Act funding. I'm asking that if recommendations from the people, stakeholders of our county cannot be taken, that Helen Robbins Myers, our county CAO, would take over this budget and direct the CARES Act funding or delegate the CARES Act funding in the budget. That is what the CAO does anyway. And so if these recommendations cannot be met, we're asking that would be done. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes public testimony on these 2 items. Chairman Cox.
Very good. Well, I want to thank all the speakers on this item this afternoon. Obviously, we've got 2 items, 14 and 28, that we combined together because they both really do focus on the allocation of the CARES Act funds. As the situation evolves, and we know that everything is evolving so quickly in regards to CARES Act funding and the whole COVID-19 crisis, I wanted to suggest perhaps a couple of modifications to the board letter on item 14. As has been pointed out in the letter, the city of San Diego got $249 million in CARES Act funding from the federal government. Of course, they're dealing with how those funds will be spent. The $334 million that the county got, there's a proposal in item 28 to suggest an allocation of the entire remaining funds in that, realizing we already appropriated $5 million for child care's services a couple of weeks ago. The 17 cities in San Diego County, the other 17 cities other than the city of San Diego, obviously were not included in the CARES Act funding. And so I think it's important for us to realize that all 17 cities are doing things in their cities to support the COVID response. And I have to at least comment, I've really been impressed not only with the cooperation we've had with the city of San Diego, but with the other 17 cities. This has really been a team effort, a regional effort in trying to deal with the COVID-19 crisis. So the board letter that Supervisor Gaspar and I brought forward on item 14 was to suggest allocating $50 million to the 17 cities based on a population formula. Since then, we've heard the governor and his budget revised last week indicate that there would be $450 million coming to the cities in California, and that would also be split up presumably on a population basis, which we think is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 million that would be going to the cities. So in San Diego County. So what I would propose to do is to make a motion to approve item 14 with the following revisions: that we establish an allocation or appropriation of $25 million from the county's share of the CARES Act funding to be directed to the 17 cities in San Diego County outside the city of San Diego, and that the distribution be based on a population formula. The other change that I would suggest is that in the last line of the board letter, it says that should a city receive future state or federal stimulus funds, all funds allocated to that city by the county shall be returned. I would strike the reference to the state and just leave it in reference to the federal stimulus funds. If there's future funds that are coming, then that would necessitate the refund or the return of funding from the county's CARES Act. As a part of this agreement, these funds would have to be spent by September 30th. The good news is the County of San Diego has already received these funds, and I think with a very quick agreement from the 17 individual cities, we could get this money out to them. The remaining $25 million that the state has indicated they will make available will take a little bit longer because I believe it has to go through the legislative process, but I suspect it might be as soon as the budget is done, that would be available. So that would be my motion, and I'll call on Supervisor Gaspar for her comments.
Thank you, Chairman. I second the motion, and thank you very much for your partnership. As a former mayor, I certainly empathize with our municipal governments and the significant challenges you are facing. Sales tax revenue plus property tax revenue provides the resources needed to maintain strong city infrastructure and to protect public safety. Economic development in all of our cities is necessary as a prevention strategy for this entire region. If businesses close their doors forever, employees lose their jobs, are at higher risk for entering the safety that we implement on the county level. Given the financial impact this pandemic has already shown, our safety net needs will be significant. So instead of waiting for our citizens to fail, I agree that we need to invest in our San Diego families and our municipal government. So I'm pleased to support this today. I wanted to make a comment about all being allocated to CWS. I agree with the speaker today that it would be really nice to run the priorities of the Child Family Strengthening Advisory Board and just make sure that all of that money is going to priority areas at the time. Obviously, the situation has changed a lot with this pandemic. A lot of kiddos out of sight right now. It's very concerning. It's concerning to see a drop off in reporting for child abuse by 50%. That scares me. That statistic keeps me up at night. I feel better if we have that advisory board take a look at the best way to spend those dollars, but absolutely agree that appropriating the funds are necessary. Thank you.
Very good. Any additional comments? Seeing no
question. We're just talking item 14 at this point, right?
Yeah, we're just dealing on item 14 right now, and then we'll deal with 28.
Real quick on item 14, I support this measure. I think it is important that we provide help to the cities throughout our region. And we just encourage through the implementation process, to the extent the staff can, to take into account the number of COVID cases. Obviously, the impact of COVID is somewhat tied to the number of actual cases. And I think that's a good point that was raised. And we just encourage us to be mindful of that moving forward. But happy to support the item and commend both of you for bringing it forward.
Okay, is there any other supervisors wishing to talk on this item? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you. Chairman Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Jacob?
Aye.
Supervisor Gaspar?
Aye.
Supervisor Fletcher?
Fletcher, aye.
Vice Chairman Desmond?
Aye.
Chairman Cox, that motion passes unanimously with all board members being present and voting aye.
Very good. Now we'll move to vote on item number 28. This item was brought forward by Supervisor Fletcher and Supervisor Jacob. Supervisor Fletcher, do you have any comments you wanted to make?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to join my colleague, Supervisor Jacob, in bringing forward this item, which outlines a program we are calling San Diego Cares Economic and Humanitarian Stimulus Package. We see the opportunity in front of us for what are the actions we can take to help local businesses, behavioral health, strengthen our child welfare programs. We know coronavirus is not only a debilitating disease, it has an impact on our community that is much greater than just the public health aspect. It's put a tremendous strain on our local economy. It has created stress and anxiety and isolation in our community. And it is disrupting the safe and nurturing environment that our educational institutions provide children. We must fully balance the use of our limited resources in the most appropriate manner moving forward. And so our board letter here outlines the Federal CARES Act allocation to date at $334 million. We had previously discussed as a board the allocation they need to have $175 million available for the county COVID-19 response and recovery, $100 million available for the T3, testing, tracing, and treatment, which is a foundation and cornerstone part of our ability to reopen. The $5 million, which was already allocated to child welfare, the money that was just allocated for cities. And out of the remaining 34 million, we're proposing 34 million to be used, broken into two categories. One, economic stimulus for small business, and two is adapting delivery of health and human services delivery, primarily around behavioral health and child welfare. And we think that this has the ability for us to do the greatest good for the greatest number in the most appropriate way for the county. I want to briefly touch on two of these items real quick. In particular on child welfare, there's been a 41% decrease in the number of referrals to the child abuse hotline since the stay-at-home order was issued. But this market decline reflects the reality that most child welfare referrals are initiated by teachers in schools. They are mandatory reporters. And because our school districts have not been in contact with the kids, the teachers are not able to observe and report these instances of potential abuse or neglect. And so we think that this is a concerning reality that we face. And the goal of this $2 million allocation would be to provide funding to our child welfare department to be able to visit families while physically distancing, to evaluate their safety, the condition, to offer support, to help connect them with needed services, to evaluate and screen the conditions of the family and provide supportive services there. And we think that this providers would be able to access these funds to help families get through this difficult period, to manage their way through the challenges, but it would also give us a touch point to be able to check on the health and welfare of these kids and try and fill in the gaps. I want to thank our Child and Family Strengthening Council, in particular those members of the council who actually show up for the working group meetings, the multiple working group meetings that took place in October to identify this problem, to talk about potential solutions, and to help us arrive at this is the thing we should do moving forward. Our full board will meet at the beginning of June, and we will certainly socialize and seek input about the proper implementation in terms of making sure that we do this the right way. But our Child and Family Strengthening Council has been a tremendous asset to our county and to our community, and their feedback and engagement has been very helpful in getting us to the point of recognizing the problem and coming up with a framework for a solution that the full board, when we meet in June, can continue to evaluate and make sure that we implement it properly. But I think that is very important. Second piece of our effort is around behavioral health. I know that we are all concerned about the impact on mental health and drug treatment services. In the last 4 months, county behavioral health contractors have made a fundamental shift in how they deliver and provide services. In December, the rate of telephonic and telehealth contacts were less than 5% of all contacts. In April, they were over 90% of all contacts. And so this represents the shift that has happened. We have not made a corresponding investment in helping support this shift with technology and training and infrastructure to make sure that folks can access the services. And that is in part recognized that total utilization of the services since the issuance of our public health orders have dropped. Among mental health providers, total service minutes have dropped by a third. Among substance abuse disorder treatments, those have dropped by approximately 50%. And so this proposed action would vastly improve our behavioral health services and delivery to assess contractors and service providers with technology infrastructure, staff training, and software to help provide these gaps to ensure ongoing treatment throughout this crisis. This access to ongoing treatment could help prevent a lot of very negative impacts that we're all worried about in helping stabilize. We want to help stabilize individuals, give them the care and help that they need. Additionally, enhanced care coordination, including the involvement of peer support providers, is needed to support our behavioral health clients to help address the barriers to accessing care while transitioning to different levels of care. And we think that this is a appropriate investment we can make in our behavioral health system to meet the needs of today. And then finally, on economic stimulus, we know that our unemployment rates are at a staggering level. We know that we have significant challenges with our small businesses, in particular those in the hospitality industry. And so we're directing the Chief Administrative Officer to develop a comprehensive economic development strategy utilizing these $17 million and to get input and advice and guidance and report back to our board in 45 days for things that we could do in order to be of service. So again, that is the framework and the approach. And I want to thank in particular Supervisor Jacob for all of her efforts in pointing the need to not piecemeal this, but actually provide a comprehensive framework and lay it out And so I make a motion to approve item 28, and we'd love to turn it over to Supervisor Jacob for her comments.
Okay, Supervisor Jacob.
I'll second the motion, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Supervisor Fletcher basically said it all, but I have a couple of things I'd like to add very briefly. You look at $334 million, that's a significant amount of funding. And it's our belief that it's important not to piecemeal the funding, but to have a comprehensive approach and a plan that lays out the priorities for the expenditures. And that's what this does. We've only voted before on the child care, the $5 million for child care, and then on the prior item, the $25 million for cities. Other than that, we have not taken votes on the entire plan. So that's why we brought this forward. And our highest priority at the county is response to the outbreak, including the need to test, trace, and treat. But as you can see in the plan, there's also a need to consider funding that can provide for businesses and cities and the communities in behavioral health and other ways that Supervisor Fletcher has laid out. I think a comprehensive plan is the most effective way in order to allocate the expenditure of these monies. And after your board letter was docketed, then we found out through the May revise that there was substantial additional CARES dollars that would be coming to the counties and cities from the state. So that's really good news. I should say the smaller cities other than the city of San Diego. So I think the action today that's before the board would bolster the state money and help our businesses once again, help with mental health addiction issues with some of the kids that are in probably not a real good situation that need to be checked up on. So I'm fully in support of the plan, and I would urge the board to join us.
Okay, Supervisor Desmond, you wish to speak?
Yeah, I have a question, I guess. So on item 28 then, item D, the 20 million to cities would be changed to 25 million, is that right? Well, doing math, that doesn't leave 34 million for items E and F. That leaves 29 million for items E and F.
Well, the plan, you're right, Jim, good. But the plan is, in discussing this with our CAO, we're getting additional money from the state, CARES dollars, so that
We don't have those. We don't have those to allocate in this item because we spent 5 million already in additional. So I guess you said there was 17 million for economic stimulus and 17 million for behavioral health. We're 5 million short because we gave 5 million to the cities. So I get it. You're getting more, but the math doesn't add up on 28 with us giving 25 million to the cities.
Okay, so I've discussed this with Helen, our CAO, and Helen, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this, but as far as I know, there's a way to do this.
Certainly, Supervisor and Vice Chairman, we could, since I have to come back on the 17 million for the economic stimulus in the region, we would be coming back with how we would allocate that. And the assumption is at that point in time, we would have whatever additional CARES Act money is coming from the state. So we would be able to take it out of that. And if not, then we would come back with a proposal of where else we could find that 5 million in the budget. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that this is on item 28. I do think it probably makes more sense to have a comprehensive plan. And as was pointed out in the governor's May revise last week, there will be additional money coming to the county. I think this provides us some good direction. I'm sure as we really find out what the total amount of money coming back to us, we will probably want to come back and revisit adding some additional funding to these items. And perhaps there's other things that we haven't dealt with at this point that we would want to take into consideration. So I think this is a good plan, and it's something that we can certainly something I can support, and I hope my colleagues can support it too. Any other?
Chairman, Supervisor Kristen Gaspar here. I have a question for you. I think you're also on that advisory committee. Is there a way to convene that committee and just make sure that the allocations are where they should be? I'm sure that group has a lot to say in this regard and could actually be helpful to us. Is there a downside to having that committee review this?
Which committee are you talking about? Child Welfare Advisory?
The strengthening board, yes.
Okay, for the 2 million? Well, we're going to be meeting in early June, and I think at that point we can certainly get their input.
I think that would be great and advisable because we want to get these dollars out there into our community. We just want to make sure it's a considerable amount of money. Let's make certain that we're reaching as many kids as possible with these dollars. And since there's already a meeting scheduled, it makes sense to run it by.
Right. I would anticipate that the Child Welfare Services Department, led by Kim Giardino, will probably be coming forward with some recommendations for those funds at that meeting. I would anticipate.
Supervisor Cox, Supervisor Gaspar's connection might have cut out during this time when I specifically addressed this, that the working groups of that committee raised the awareness of this problem and the need for this action. But the entire proposal will go to the full board on June 8th. To get their input and get their feedback. And what we're doing is allocating money in a direction, but as it comes to the implementation of how that is rolled out, it certainly won't be implemented or rolled out by the first week of June. And so the plan was, we got the idea and the need to do this from the Child and Family Strengthening Council's working groups, multiple meetings throughout April. We would allocate the money and then we would go back to that board in June, present the plan, and then get feedback and be able to make any adjustments or changes or tweaks before it is actually put into action. And so what's being suggested is exactly what has been planned and what should happen if we're to be successful in this effort.
Well, thank you, Supervisor. I did not have audio issues. I did hear what you had to say there. I just have a problem bringing items before any committee for review that's requesting input after the fact. I would rather come with an open mind to that meeting because I know we have a lot of valuable voices that can provide feedback at the time. So I hear what you have to say. I'm thankful for the commitment to these kiddos and I'm pleased that we'll be able to get this before that board. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you. Chairman Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Jacob?
Aye.
Supervisor Gaspar?
Aye.
Supervisor Fletcher?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Desmond?
Math has to work for me. No.
Chairman Cox, that motion passes with Vice Chairman Desmond voting no, all other supervisors being present and voting aye.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 7. This is to receive a plan of ongoing solutions to address homelessness in the unincorporated communities of San Diego County. Request for authorization to expand hotel and motel voucher program and implement local rental subsidy program and adoption of an urgency ordinance expanding the use of classification of emergency shelter and permitting such activities on additional properties in the unincorporated area of the County of San Diego. It's my understanding that the staff has a presentation on this item, and if there's no objection, we'll go ahead and go directly to the staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me introduce our acting director of HHSA, Dean Arabatsis, to give the presentation. Thank you. Go ahead, Dean.
Good afternoon, Chairman Cox and members of the board. Today's item provides an update on the immediate and short-term homeless solutions directed by your board on January 28th, 2020 and February 25th, 2020, and requests authorization in support of ongoing actions to build a comprehensive and sustainable system necessary to address homelessness in the unincorporated communities of the county. Here to speak in further detail is David Estrella, Director of Housing and Community Development Services. David.
Good afternoon. Over 500,000 people make their homes in the unincorporated areas of the county. This is the second largest metropolitan area by population and most geographically diverse in the region. There are 4 primary recommendations before you today. Receiving a comprehensive plan addressing homelessness in the unincorporated area, expansion of the hotel-motel voucher program for fiscal year 2021, implementation of temporary storage and service facilities to serve persons experiencing homelessness, implementation of a local rental subsidy program, and expansion of case management services. We will now provide you with next steps and updates to the plan to address homelessness. On February 28th, your board directed staff to return with a recommended plan to secure and fund housing with supportive services for persons experiencing homelessness in the unincorporated areas of San Diego County. This plan is included in today's letter as Attachment C. Provides a summary of immediate, short-term, and long-term housing opportunities through emergency, temporary, and permanent housing options. Many of these interventions are before your board today, while others present opportunities for future action. The Hotel Motel Voucher Program was initiated by your board on January 28th. As of May 8th, 246 individuals are housed in motels and receiving case management services. In addition, the county service provider has outreach to 332 homeless individuals in the unincorporated area of the county. We are requesting authorization to expand this program and increase capacity for housing in the Hotel Motel Voucher Program for up to 350 participants in fiscal year 2021. The expansion would require up to $15.4 million in funding annually to provide shelter, case management, and housing navigation. This may decrease based on the number of people that transition out of the Hotel Motel Voucher Program and enter permanent housing. Included in today's recommendations to provide emergency intervention for homeless individuals in the unincorporated area is the establishment of a storage and service site. This program would provide an opportunity to engage with homeless persons as an entry point into receiving low-barrier services, possibly leading to participating in housing programs in the future. Staff have evaluated 860 properties in the unincorporated area of the county. Through site evaluation, staff identified one site for lease in Spring Valley that continues to see a concentration of homeless persons. The estimated annual cost to operate this site is $740,000. An initial investment of $71,000 in one-time costs will be required to set up the site and purchase storage bins. Additionally, proposes the establishment of a rental subsidy program, also known as a tenant-based rental assistance program. The program will provide permanent housing for up to 350 participants exiting out of the County Hotel Motel Voucher Program. The annual costs for this action are estimated to be $7.6 million in year one. The ongoing costs will fluctuate as increases and/or decreases in the rental market are realized and the actual levels and types of housing are reached. In light of the current COVID-19 pandemic, which has created increased urgency to set up solutions that help this vulnerable population self-isolate, staff is recommending the board direct that the county's zoning ordinance be amended. The amendment will exempt a county project in Spring Valley and is projected to be on leased land. Lastly, we are requesting authorization for funding in fiscal years 1920 and 2021 for the proposals described: a storage and service facility, Hotel Motel Voucher Program expansion, and the implementation of the local rental subsidy program, including supportive services. This concludes our presentation, and we're available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, I believe this item really was initially generated by Supervisor Jacobs, so I'm going to call on her first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank staff for the report and all the work that's been done on this. It was some time ago that Supervisor Desmond and I brought forward a plan, a comprehensive plan for the homeless in the unincorporated area. Since that time, I've been working with leaders both in Spring Valley and the community of Lakeside to try to site temporary facilities as well as permanent facilities in those locations. As you can see, the initial response has really been pretty substantial and getting quite a number of people that were out in the creek beds, on the streets, in the park, off the streets, and into hotels or motel rooms. However, for some reason, they just keep coming. So we still have the problem of having a more temporary site, at least for storage of goods, of the homeless belongings. And then we're looking for a location also in each community for pallet housing, and then the final step of affordable housing. And staff has just done an incredible job in working with the community, working with me, and trying to find locations, which is not easy to do. So this costs a lot of money, but what's the alternative? And the success so far, I think, demonstrates that this can be done in a very compassionate way and in a way that is helping people. We can't help everybody because everybody doesn't want to have help, quite frankly. Some of them resist the help and they want to stay right where they are. And that's why we've been working also with sheriff and the district attorney and to see if there's a way to provide the what I call the carrot and the stick approach in terms of people that really don't want to go anywhere. So again, a big shout out to the staff. You all worked hard, Marco from General Services, and I know David from Housing, and we've had our parks people involved. We've had various departments involved. So with that, I would move approval of the item.
Okay, this was co-doctored by Supervisor Desmond originally. So Supervisor, you want to make some comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank Supervisor Jacob for, we were partnering on this particular item as it pertained to the unincorporated area. And I wanted to thank David Australia and all the staff members for, their time and effort on this. Was, great, moving forward. I was glad to hear about the rental subsidy, because we heard a lot about rental assistance programs that are being asked for. I know this may not be exactly what they're looking for, but it is a program that people are worth checking out to see if they qualify for. I also want to note there's an errata sheet on here that the emergency ordinance that the urgency ordinance, I said, this ordinance only applies to the property right now located at 9014 Kenwood Drive in Spring Valley. So that was part of the errata sheet, and I just want to make sure that got read into the record. And then I just had a question on 4B, and I know we're asking in item 4 to ask our CAO to pursue a permanent amendments and return with 180 days with those amendments to the zoning ordinance. I guess on 4B, I'd like to, and this is expansion of the definition of emergency shelter. I'd like that to be limited to the areas with the highest concentrations of homeless persons, and that staff can set appropriate parameters to accomplish that. So we want to put the homeless shelters where, near where the homeless are. And so that's effective. And so when that comes back, I'd just like to have that limited to the areas of the highest concentration of homeless for the definitions for emergency shelter, and have that in there. Is that okay with the maker of the motion?
Certainly is.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll second it if I haven't already. Sure, but thank you very much.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Jacob, seconded by Supervisor Desmond. Is there any other comments by supervisors?
Mr. Chairman, we do have one public speaker that has wished to address the board on this item.
Very good. Let's go ahead and hear that individual now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The caller with last four digits 8767. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board.
Good afternoon, Board Chair Jacob and Supervisors Cox, Gaspar, Fletcher, and Desmond. My name is Savannah Dudar, and I'm a Policy Associate for the ACLU of San Diego and Imperial Counties. The ACLU is a proud member of Invest in San Diego Families. I'm here today to urge the Board of Supervisors to deepen the county's investments in non-congregate forms of shelter, such as the hotel and motel voucher program. San Diegans experiencing sheltered and unsheltered homelessness deserve expansive protections and resources. Folks who are experiencing homelessness are at a great risk of contracting COVID-19. Homeless shelters are congregate living facilities that cannot realistically abide by CDC social distancing and cleanliness guidelines. We must transition our region's homeless community from emergency shelters into non-congregate forms of shelter. In their 2020 point-in-time count, the Regional Task Force on Homelessness identified 7,619 individuals experiencing homelessness in San Diego County. More than half of this population is facing unsheltered homelessness. We are glad that the county is providing access to hotel and motel rooms for people experiencing homelessness and proactively looking into programs that assist individuals transitioning from temporary living situations to more stable forms of housing, such as the rent subsidy program. However, the point-in-time count underscores the need for more vouchers and greater resources to assist folks transitioning out of emergency shelters. To accurately serve the needs of this vulnerable community, we must increase our investments in the hotel and motel voucher and rent subsidy programs. Moving forward, the county must continue to be proactive. We call on you to support the ISDF recommendations, including creating a tenant and homeowner COVID-19 relief fund to assist middle to low income people regardless of their immigration status, as well as implementing rent control. In the wake of COVID-19, the board must act quickly and expand protections, resources, and re-entry methods for San Diegans experiencing homelessness. Thank you for your time and leadership during this unprecedented public health crisis.
Thank you. And that concludes public testimony on this item, Chairman Cox.
And I'd also note for the record that we received one e-comment on this item.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the part of the board?
Chair Cox, real briefly, I'm supportive of this effort moving forward. I realize this represents about 40% of our HAP funds. I would just note that the HAP funds that come in are regional funds. They're not jurisdiction-specific funds that are just for unincorporated. The state guidance is very clear that they are to promote regional collaboration and to support regional efforts around homelessness. And so I would just, as we look towards the appropriation of the remaining 60% of those, I would encourage us to continue to work with our continuum of cares, with our cities, with everyone out there to make sure that we're fulfilling the actual intent of the state guidance in sending this money to us. We wouldn't want to be in a situation where we create recurring programs and then come in and have it be deemed that we weren't in compliance with the outline of the program. So happy to support it today. And as we look forward to the allocation of the remaining 60%, looking forward to engaging on our efforts in order to make sure that we're fulfilling that regional requirement of addressing the entire regional effort. So with that, I think it's great and happy to support it. Thank you.
Okay, I would just add my compliments to Supervisor Jacob and Desmond for bringing this item forward. I think it's a needed effort on the part of the county, and I commend them for their focus on this particular item. If there is no further discussion, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Chairman Cox. I'd also note for the record that an errata was distributed for this item that amends the proposed ordinance. Chairman Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Jacob?
Aye.
Supervisor Gaspar?
Aye.
Supervisor Fletcher?
Fletcher, aye.
Vice Chairman Desmond?
Aye.
Chairman Cox, that motion passes unanimously with all board members being present and voting aye.
Very good. The next item we're going to be dealing with is item 17. This is leveraging existing county grant programs to help community-based organizations adapt and sustain their COVID-19 response efforts. And this item was brought forward by Supervisor Gaspar. Supervisor, do you want to make some introductory comments? I think we have one speaker on this item.
Sure. I made comments long ago, it seems, at the beginning of the meeting when this was on the consent calendar. I'm appreciative of your consideration again today. The reason for this item was out of a discussion with lots of our nonprofit partners. As you know, in 2010, we adopted the Live Well San Diego model. It was the recognition that the government couldn't solve all of the social challenges that we have alone, and we would have to rely on a network of people within our communities to help us. And that's where many of these providers in the community came from, the nonprofits that we rely upon to provide valuable services in our community. They're struggling. The impact of this pandemic has been significant on our nonprofit partners. We're worried about solvency with many of them. They haven't been able to do their annual dinners and fundraising events and get the type of support that they need to sustain their programs. But we also recognize that we won't have the tax revenues coming into the County of San Diego that help support one grant program in particular. So we know that we will have limited funds to distribute to these needed nonprofit partners throughout the next calendar year. So we need to make some changes considering that people have unique challenges at this time. So I thought that it might be a nice idea to create kind of a hybrid between the two grant programs temporarily so that we could have applications be as broad as possible to serve the needs of these organizations and help prevent them falling into insolvency. And also it was important to be able to delay some timelines in terms of the organizations that have already been awarded grants because they haven't been able to implement all of their plans and programs given the shutdown as well. So again, I'm not suggesting that this program, the grant program, should change forever. This is a temporary situation in the middle of a public health crisis, but I think it's really important that we as a board protect our valuable Live Well partners, and that's why I brought this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Supervisor. And why don't we go to the one speaker that we have?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have one request to speak on this item, and I will note for the record that we did receive one e-comment on this item. I'll turn it over to Aaron to call the speaker.
Thank you. Our only speaker on this item is David Garcias.
Yes, this is President David Garcias of SEIU Local 221. Speaking, we believe we're not in support of this motion, and I mean, that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Gaspar, did you want to make a motion then?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve. Thank you.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second the item.
All right, we have a motion by Supervisor Gaspar, seconded by Supervisor Desmond. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just a couple of comments. There's quite a history on the Neighborhood Reinvestment Program. And as you and I both remember, there were some issues with a couple of our colleagues years ago that made some headlines, and you could actually say it was a misuse, a misexpenditure of these funds that appeared more like self-interest and self-promotion. And as co-author of tightening up the Neighborhood Reinvestment Program back at that time, I cannot support this item. I firmly believe that what this would do, if the board passes it, it guts the Neighborhood Reinvestment Program policy, which would open up the possibility of conflicts of interest and self-promotion. And I think that's wrong.
Is there further discussion?
No, Mr. Chair, I would just support, echo the comments of Supervisor Jacob there. I think this item doesn't change the dollar amounts available. I think we have plenty of flexibility within the current confines of the system. And I think that the efforts in place provide us sufficient flexibility to certainly meet the need both of COVID, but of other times. And the protections that are afforded by the existing policy, I believe, are appropriate.
Okay. Yeah, Supervisor Desmond.
Just a real quick comment. I want to make sure, because I thought I read it, this is a temporary, this is not to permanently change this. This is only during the COVID response efforts. Is that true?
Correct.
Supervisor? Yeah.
That's correct. And
okay,
also,
there's always risk with everything we do. It's even risk opening up businesses and risk with the health virus. I guess, the fact that some people could act badly is always a risk, I guess, with everything. And so I'm willing to, support this, particularly during the COVID. And a lot of the companies that are, people reaching out to us have different and unique special circumstances. If we act like adults, then normally then we don't have to put in some, and I understand what happened in the past, and we don't want that to happen again. But I think during this COVID situation, we need to give some more flexibility so we can get dollars where they do the best work as soon as we can. So thank you very much.
Yes, the clerk, if there was some additional speakers on this item.
Mr. Chairman, we do have additional speakers on this item. So go ahead and call up those. Aaron, if you could call up the phone number 7610.
Yes, 7610. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Supervisors and CAO. Paola Martinez Montes with the Invest in San Diego Families Coalition. I'm speaking to urge the board to vote against this item. Our coalition has a strong commitment to push for accountability and transparency in county government, and this proposal would do the opposite. I do want to remind the board that
that you had to reverse the money directed to Save for America, where Supervisor Gaspar served on the board, which created a conflict of interest. You will also recall that our coalition sent a letter asking for an audit of all of Supervisor Gaspar's directed funds to assess if there were any other conflict of interest, legal violations, or ethical violations regarding neighborhood reinvestment grants to organizations she served on boards of. If the board were to move forward with this item, it would eliminate the grant application requirements established for the Neighborhood Reinvestment Program in 2009, and instead revert back to the application process back from the 1980s. In this critical time, community organizations and the county have been adapting to address community needs. We are all working together to learn from this pandemic and move forward with this knowledge, not move backwards 40 years. The Neighborhood Reinvestment Program's grant application requirements were established in order to ensure greater transparency of county funds and create accountability for county officials. This new program was created in response to the abuse and misuse of public grant funds to serve private political interests. Former Supervisor Ron Roberts, for example, gave this slush fund money to a grant recipient who later paid for multiple private trips to China. New grant applications requirements were created to protect public dollars so that our taxpayers' hard-earned money would not be misused. In this critical time, it is essential that every county dollar be used to support and invest in our communities. I urge the board to protect our county funds and vote against this item. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have one additional caller. If 4176 would like to address the board on this item, you may do so at this time. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Thomas. I am a student at UCSD, and as a resident in San Diego, I also pay taxes to the San Diego County government, and I urge the board to vote down Supervisor Gaspar's proposal to remove the corruption safeguards that would open up the public's money, the money that myself, people I live with, and the people I know pay to the county government, and opening it up for what could be clear partisan politics. It is clear that when members of this board parrot the anti-science, anti-safety rhetoric coming out of Trump's Republican White House and bring forward proposals like this one, their motive is to win re-election and not serve the public good. When removing accountability and transparency protections like this one proposed by Supervisor Gaspar will allow supervisors to spread money throughout their districts for their own partisan political ends. By removing these safeguards that protect our money from being spent, this money could be used to unethically influence voters, and it is clear that this proposal threatens the integrity of county government. That is why I asked this board today to protect the integrity of our county government and not allow Supervisor Gaspar to use our money to augment her campaign. I ask that this board will vote no on this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have an additional speaker, 5340. If you could please state your name for the audio record. Let's try 5636.
Hello, my name is Wiley, and I am here to ask the Board of Supervisors to vote no against this proposal. I am 18 years old, and although I personally have a belief that government can provide opportunity for our youth in our community, there are so many people my age that are cynical about our government. Our president insults the press and his opponents on a daily basis. Honestly, I was shocked to learn that supervisors have the right to direct funds to their supporters. It seems likely to cause corruption or conflicts of interest. So you can imagine my further surprise to learn that Supervisor Gaspar is proposing to eliminate the transparency and accountability for this program. How do you expect young people to trust our government if you aren't being transparent? How do you expect me to tell other young people to have faith in our public officials if you haven't earned it? I ask the Board of Supervisors to tell Supervisor Gaspar that the government is by the people and for the people. Vote no on corruption and vote no on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go back to 5340. 5340, would you like to address the board on item 17? In that case, that appears to conclude public testimony on this item. Chairman Cox.
Hey, let me just make a couple of comments. The creation of the neighborhood reinvestment program was actually back in the late 1990s. And I'm a firm supporter of the program. I think it's done tremendous good for nonprofits throughout the region. And I think with the revisions that Supervisor Jacob and I brought forward a number of years ago, I think the program has worked very well. And I think each of the supervisors, as they have allocated funds, have docketed those items for the board consideration. And I think if you look at the allocations that have been made over the last number of years, I think they've been very good allocations to nonprofits and to community organizations and to projects that are being done by government agencies, particularly the county, and sometimes working with other cities and other jurisdictions. So I'm a firm believer in the program. I do think that while I don't, I think the concerns that have been raised by Supervisor Gaspar are legitimate in regards to the fact that we're in very unusual times with the COVID-19. And I think, frankly, a lot of the allocations that have been made over the last 2 months have been in direct response to providing service funding to organizations that are helping to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. We do have a policy within the existing policy that allows for the board to waive portions of the board policy. And I can't think of hardly any instance in which a request for a waiver of board policy has not been granted. And so because of that, I don't think we need to make any modifications. I like the restrictions that we put in place, particularly in regards to the acknowledgement. The acknowledgement on any grant by the Neighborhood Reinvestment Program should go to the county. And it has since we put in these modifications a number of years ago. So I'm going to reluctantly vote against the request for the board item, but I certainly don't question anybody's motives. I think we are in unusual times, and I think we just have to make sure that we give due consideration to requests that come in for COVID-19 related responses. Is there any further discussion? If not, would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you. Chairman Cox?
No.
Supervisor Jacob? Supervisor Jacob?
No.
Supervisor Gaspar?
Aye.
Supervisor Fletcher?
Fletcher, no.
Vice Chairman Desmond?
Yes.
Chairman Cox, that motion fails with Supervisor Gaspar and Vice Chairman Desmond voting aye, all other supervisors being present and voting no.
Okay, we're going to move on to item number 26. This is the creation of the Leon L. Williams San Diego County Human Relations Commission. This item was brought forward by Supervisor Fletcher. So Supervisor, why don't you go ahead and make your comments, and then I know we do have a number of people that want to speak on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have an opportunity to bring something before our board at a very timely moment. In the last several years, divisive rhetoric and hate crimes have been on the rise across the United States, and San Diego County is certainly no exception to bearing the impact of this. According to Southern Poverty Law Center, the number of hate groups operating throughout the nation rose to a record high of 1,020 in 2018. Hate crimes based on race and prejudice in the United States reached a 16-year high in 2018, according to a report issued last year by the FBI. We're all aware that in San Diego, a little over a year ago, in an anti-Semitic act of violence, a gunman opened fire with an AR-15 in Poway, in the synagogue, killing Lori Kay and injuring 3 others. And over the past 4 months, the COVID-19 crisis has highlighted longstanding social justice inequities and exposed overt actions of racism, making the creation of the Human Relations Commission a necessity, an appropriate step, and I believe a priority for us in the region. We have seen issues around COVID-19. The virus called the Chinese virus or the Wuhan virus has provided racists with a thinly veiled excuse to threaten and target the API community. Anti-Asian hurtful and derogatory graffiti recently defamed a Little League field in the Allied Gardens neighborhood of San Diego. Local Asian and Pacific Islander businesses have been decimated by the unfair and unfounded attacks, blaming them for the pandemic. Our Latino and immigrant communities are also suffering from an increase in hate crimes. Anti-immigrant sentiment is an all-time high. This month, there were 2 separate instances in CNT of people in grocery stores using the COVID-19 crisis to sport KKK hoods and swastikas covering their face masks. And while we can't expect a commission to eliminate hate or discrimination or to solve all of the problems and challenges and divisions in our country, the goal of the new Leon L. Williams Human Relations Commission is to bring the community together, to begin to tackle these issues, to have frank and honest conversations, to confront difficult subjects, to increase cultural competency and empathy across society. The commission is unique and it will be empowered to establish their own mission, focus, and scope, as well as round out the composition of the commission board. We want to create an environment that encourages greater understanding and respect for one another. The naming of this board is also significant, as the county for many years had a Human Relations Commission, but it went away, as happens sometimes with commissions in the late 90s. And given the recent acts and the things that we're seeing in our society, it seems like an appropriate time to bring it back, to tackle issues of racism, xenophobia, social injustice, as well as building bridges to allow people to truly understand one another a little bit better. The originator of the Human Relations Commission was Supervisor Leon Williams, the only African-American to serve on the County Board of Supervisors. And I have enjoyed my conversations with him. I have the great honor and distinction of holding the seat that he once held. And he's done so much for civil rights, race relations, and building a more inclusive community throughout his entire life. We want to honor his good work and his legacy by naming the commission in his honor. With board approval, the commission will consist of 25 members. Each board office would appoint 2 of their own representatives. In addition to those 10, there would also be seats for the district attorney, and I appreciate tremendously the district attorney's complete support of the Human Relations Commission and her input and guidance as we sought to shape it. It would include a designee of the sheriff or designee, and again, I want to thank Sheriff Gore for his engagement and his complete support of bringing this back. Representatives from Jewish Family Services, San Diego LGBT Community Center, International Rescue Commission, San Diego Rapid Response Network, Southern California Chairman's Association, San Diego chapter of the Black Association of California. And in one addition that I'll propose in my motion is to designate a seat specifically for the Asian Pacific Islander Commission. This seat would be chosen by the Union of Pan-Asian Communities. It would be a person chosen by the Union of Pan-Asian Communities, the Asian Business Association, and the San Diego API Coalition. The 3 of them would each have 1 vote to select their nominee, and it would represent all of them collectively. I also want to point out that there are a number of other groups that deserve representation and seating, which is why we've purposefully left a number of the seats for the commission to fill out. Once the supervisors appoint their designees, these entities appoint theirs. They will be able to assess who is missing from the table and who ought to be there. And then they can round out the commission to make sure it is very inclusive by selecting the additional members to be recommended with this board to confirm them. In closing, I'll say our strength as a community and a region comes from the diverse people and perspectives where they live. I happen to live in City Heights. I know firsthand the diversity of my community. More than 30 languages are spoken. And I'm proud to represent an area that has a large populations of refugees and immigrants, both as friends and neighbors. And so I believe that this is a prudent step. This is a wise step. This is an appropriate step. And with that, I would make a motion to approve with the amendment that I just outlined. And if appropriate, we'd like to show a short video. Supervisor Leon Williams was not able to be with us today in person, but he is with us in video and would like to play that before we go to the speakers.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second the motion, and I have some comments, but I'll wait until after the speakers.
Okay, let's go ahead and see the video, and then we'll go to the speakers.
Just 1 second while we pull that up.
when you're at the, when you can really make a difference in what happens in society, there is something rewarding about that.
No, it's the best.
Even those hard work. Well, I guess the commission together, and a lot of the people who were on the commission, I think, very devoted to it. They had a vision of their permission, of their possible achievements.
Pictures posted on social media show a man wearing what appears to be a Ku Klux Klan hood in a grocery store in Santee.
Deputies responded to a disturbance at a Food for Less on Cuyamaca Street. They found a man wearing a mask with a swastika symbol on it.
We talked about this. We want to bring back and honor you when we do it. Bring back the Human Rights Commission and do it in a way that is brought back saying, now William started this, and we want to bring it back, and we want to have representatives from all different communities there.
But we got to lose.
Yeah, we got to.
And the work is on you now.
Okay, let's go ahead and go to the speakers then, if that's the end of the video.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any members of the public that wish to speak on this item, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. I will note for the record that we have received 60 e-comments on this item. And we have 13 callers on the line to address the board. As a reminder for the callers, if you do not wish to speak on this item, please hang up and call back when the board begins discussion of the next item. We'll be calling speakers by the last 4 digits of their phone number. You'll hear a notification that your call has been unmuted when it is your turn to speak, and each caller will be asked to state their name for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes to address the board. I'd remind the public speakers they should mute their TV or their live video stream before they begin speaking. I'd like to invite the first caller.
Thank you. Caller 5544.
Hello.
Who are you?
I'm Leon Williams.
And what do you think?
And I appreciate very much what the board is doing now. And I think that even though we're a highly civilized society, we still have a lot of need to increase our respect for each other as human beings. And I appreciate the board's taking this action right now, which will, I believe, say to many people that we still have a need to grow a little bit more and to appreciate each other more. Thank you very much. And thanks, Supervisor Fletcher.
Thank you, sir. Our next caller is 3878.
Hello, this is Ellen Nash, lifetime resident of San Diego. And first of all, I would like to thank the Board of Supervisors for your leadership, also Dr. Wilma Wooten, and all the county leadership. And actually, I want to thank you just for saving lives. I'm the chair of the San Diego chapter of BAPAC, Black American Political Association of San Diego. And for several years, we have been a growing force here in helping to reduce the misery index that still exists for far too many families and individuals throughout San Diego County. We have done so by engaging our members and supporters in research and community development, particularly in areas of early childhood education, juvenile intervention, especially by helping stem the growing tide of sex trafficking among our young children and teens, and by assisting men and women in our community to obtain decent jobs and benefits, and addressing health and wealth disparities and the improvement of mental health outcomes, which has been, as you know, exacerbated by the coronavirus. We want to say that the county should have never defunded the Human Relations Commission in the 90s and disbanded it in 2018. The APAC Hall of Fame honoree, the Honorable Leon Williams, created the Human Relations Commission and the Hate Crimes Registry to tackle racial and religious tensions. He fought for state constitutional reform as a member of the California Constitutional Revision Committee and helped change the county charter to increase government accountability. Williams' prevention policy sought to create long-term solutions for issues such as crime, drugs, welfare, and health concerns. And now here we are in 2020. Yes, with the number of hate groups are operating across the United States, hitting a record high, we need a group that will help bring us together as a region.
Ma'am, I'm going
We
to ask you
also
to
need
your comments, please. Your time is up.
We also need a body that provides checks and balances around the issues of social equity, racism, discrimination, and helps county officials and departments. We really appreciate support, the complete control. Leon Williams is a pioneer. He represents everything that's good. And we want to thank Supervisor Nathan Fletcher for bringing the item forward. And I urge the rest of the board to support the Leon L. Williams Human Relations Commission. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next caller is 4577.
Hello, my name is Rabbi Eyal Fort from Chabad of La Costa, located in Carlsbad. I'm calling on behalf of the more than 20 Chabad Jewish centers sprinkled throughout San Diego County, reaching and dealing with about 100,000 Jews living in the county. And we support the creation of this San Diego Human Relations Commission. We thank Supervisor Fletcher for bringing it to everyone's attention and moving it forward. Anti-Semitism is very much alive, unfortunately, and well, and growing apparently from the tragedy that happened last year in Poway. Just this past weekend, where I live in Carlsbad, there was Nazi graffiti painted in public places, which is very troubling and of deep concern for me and my community. So we are fully supportive of this. And I also wanted to thank Supervisor Gasper, who has been good at reaching out to our community and supportive of this. So thank you very much for your efforts. We're hoping this goes through, and God bless all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is 5069.
Good afternoon. My name is Tyler Renner, and I'm with the Office of San Diego City Council Member Chris Ward, District 3. On behalf of the council member, I'm calling in support of the Leon Williams Human Relations Commission. The creation of this commission can truly help promote positive human relations and respect across the county of San Diego, regardless of gender, religion, culture, ethnicity, sexual orientation, age, and or citizenship status. Naming this commission after Leon Williams, a District 3 resident and local trailblazer, is truly fitting. Recent incidents of racism and prejudice in San Diego County have shown that there's still much work to be done. Social justice and the fight for inclusion takes intentionality, resources, and commitment. I strongly encourage your support of the Leon Williams Human Relations Commission. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Our next caller is 5323.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Kent Lee. I am the Executive Director of Pacific Arts Movement, which presents the San Diego Asian Film Festival. I'm also a member of the San Diego Asian Pacific Islander Coalition, which released a joint statement last month. You may have seen, which was sponsored by 70 API serving organizations and a direct response to the alarming increases of anti-API hate here in San Diego. And as you're all well aware, and you've mentioned it in earlier discussions, COVID-19 is impacting much more than the health, life, and livelihood of our communities. The pandemic has resulted in increased racism and xenophobia, not only directed at the API community, but it's also just resulted in disparate degrees of impacts on numerous communities of color. So as a result, I do want to register a strong support for the reestablishment of a Human Relations Commission in believing that it can help to address these issues and more countywide. The coalition and dozens of organizations who signed our request for API representation would like to thank Supervisor Fletcher for amending the resolution and to recognize the need for API representation. We also recognize that inclusivity can't end there, as other communities absolutely do need to be at the table. So thank you for taking the opportunity to consider the reestablishment of the commission and in continuing to consider how it can best represent and encourage a stronger and more inclusive San Diego County. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is 0703.
Hello, my name is William Kelly, and I'm a San Diego resident for the last 22 years. And the last 12 years, I've been a full-time volunteer at the city and county levels and some at the state as well, working with Age Well, Live Well, and Age-Friendly Cities programs. I just wanted to note that one of the things I keep hearing throughout the session, I've listened from 9 o'clock on, is the mention of an equality task force, which I think fits right in with this agenda item. It is with the utmost respect that I appreciate the very difficult decisions our Board of Supervisors has the responsibility to make on behalf of roughly 3.3 million people. It is that in that tone that I share 4 reasons for the request that you approve the creation of the Leon L. Williams San Diego County Human Relations Commission. First, the communities and neighborhoods of San Diego County are a diverse, unified, and sometimes opposing blend of social, economic, and political characteristics, with underlying religious ideologies and cultural practices. That blend presents both great opportunities and formidable challenges. Second, our own state and national constitutions aim to assure and protect the right of our fellow citizens to pursue happiness and well-being without discrimination, exclusion, or marginalization. Third, our government, economy, and citizens survive and thrive best when, whatever our differences, we mutually respect and support our individual pursuits of happiness and well-being with a focus on our common needs. Lastly, San Diego County is the second most populous California county. It is home to roughly 8.5% of the total population of California. Of the 8 most populous counties, only 3 do not have human relations commissions, and sadly, San Diego County is one of them. Respectfully, I urge you please to vote in favor of reestablishing the commission. And I thank you for all the work you all do. It's very difficult, I understand.
Thank you. Our next caller is 5672.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Murray Ramirez. And first of all, I would like to thank you, the Board of Supervisors, for your outstanding leadership and compassion during these most difficult times. God has indeed blessed me to have witnessed and been a part of the growth and change within the city and county of San Diego for over a half a century, having served and advised the last 7 mayors of San Diego and served on both city and county boards and commissions. To name a commission after one of our region's most beloved and respected civil rights icon, Leon Williams, honors a great champion of the equality of all people. I've had the honor to be the only San Diegan to have been elected 4 times as chairman of the city's Human Relations Commission. And I can tell you firsthand that such a commission builds stronger ties and builds bridges between religious, people of color, seniors, veterans, women, and minority communities. It is well known that hate crime reports and addressed at the City Commission were half or more outside the city of San Diego. A Human Relations Commission also brings community leaders together and educates them. Serving on such commission introduced me for the first time to the Ethiopian, Muslim, and Vietnamese communities and their cultures. Commissioners will also serve as ambassadors of individual supervisors to our county's diverse communities, attending events and at times presenting special proclamations on behalf of the supervisors. In closing, as I've said so many times, the Golden State is turning brown with the growth of the Latino and Asian Pacific Islander communities, and so is San Diego County. Many of you know that hate crimes are on the rise across the nation. By reinstating the San Diego County Human Commission, you will be serving and sending a strong message to all that in San Diego County, we are not about pointing fingers at each other, but extending our hands in friendship and understanding to each other. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you. Our next caller is 5700.
Hi, my name is Zhang Wei. I'm the president of a community group called Big Vote, and also a part of the San Diego Asian Pacific Islander Coalition. We have been doing a lot of work around the addressing the issue of anti-Asian racism during the COVID pandemic. But I'm super sad to see there are a lot of others, racism that going on as well. I'm very shocked to see that, the people wearing white, KKK, white hood in Santee and moths burning in Poway as well. So I'm fully supportive of the reviving of this Human Relations Commission, because we need some sort of tools in addressing only racism. And I also want to stand in, I also want to recognize the Supervisor Nathan Fletcher for your efforts in inclusive with the API communities, because this is an issue that is important to us, and we deserve a seat at the table. But at the same time, I also want to bring up the conversation around diversity as well. We should also try to recognize there is also anti-Muslim racism going on as well, that I stand in solidarity with my allies and advocating for their seat at the table as well. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Our next caller is 5933.
Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Hookeld. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Chief Public Affairs and Civic Engagement Officer at the San Diego LGBT Community Center. I'm proud to speak today in support of this resolution to create the Leon Williams San Diego County Human Relations Commission. Human Relations Commissions serve a critical function in our nation and already exist in the vast majority of metropolitan cities and counties. It is time for San Diego to join them and have our own commission to bring together leaders from various communities to work collaboratively with the county to improve our region by creating a more safe, just, and thriving society. San Diego County is rich in diversity, but that diversity must be fostered, uplifted, celebrated, and protected. The recent acts of discrimination and intolerance that have hurt our communities, affected our economy, and shined a negative spotlight on our region, the shooting at the Synagogue Shabbat of Poway last spring, the public displays of the Ku Klux Klan hood, an active shooter motivated by hate in Hillcrest last year, a swastika face mask in our grocery store this past month, along with increased incidences of hate crimes in our immigrant community. For the LGBT community, we have seen uneven progress, big steps in marriage equality, and at the same time, an increase in violence against our transgender and non-binary community. Most notably, violence against transgender women is happening at an alarming rate throughout our nation. This violence and the constant attacks of rights of the larger LGBT community underscores the importance of this Human Relations Commission to ensure our county stands against these acts of violence and prioritizes the values of every San Diegan has the right to live well, be healthy, safe, and thrive. LGBT exists in all races, religions, nationalities, and the Human Relations Commission would serve as a critical function to use this community diversity to expand its partnerships, collaboration with the county, and give voice to critical issues of equality. I urge you to support the resolution before you today, and thank you for that support.
Thank you. Our next caller is 6613.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and San Diego Supervisors. My name is Rabbi Mendel Goldstein. I'm here on behalf of Chabad of Poway and the Jewish community of Poway and Rancho Bernardo. We are part of the 100,000 Jews impacted by our Jewish centers across San Diego. We are asking for your support of creation of the Leon L. Williams San Diego County Human Relations Commission. The Human Relations Commission is very important. And as our community is still recovering from last year's event on April 27, 2019, we hope by investing in efforts to bring together our community as a whole, will bring us a step closer in ensuring that no such tragedy should ever happen again. The Torah teaches us, when God created the world, he created Adam as an individual. With regards to all the creatures, they were created as a herd. But the reason why Adam was created as one was to bring out the point that every person is compared to the entire world. This should inspire us to view everyone as truly important and to understand that God has invested in each and every one of us. Let us do everything we can to facilitate this and come to the realization that every action we take can impact the entire world. Thank you, Supervisor Fletcher, for leading this effort and engaging the Jewish community on this effort to enhance the human relations of our entire community. And we look forward to working together to create a brighter and better future for everyone in San Diego County. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is 9343.
Hi, this is Michelle Krug again, Executive Board Member of the California Alliance of Retired Americans and also representing the Democratic Women's Club that just endorsed this last night. Thank you, Supervisor Fletcher, for your proactiveness. Thank you for respecting, remembering, uplifting the work of Leon Williams, and providing this opportunity for our county to have a safe space for people to come and to actually monitor the hatred that is spreading. It seems much quicker, far and wide, almost as quick as this COVID virus. The acts that happened in Santee and all over our county are just so disheartening. So I really appreciate the effort of putting in this commission. I hope it will be an active commission, not like the Persons with Disabilities, as I said earlier, that hasn't met during this exact time when it's desperately needed for March, April, and May. I really want this to be an active unifying force within the county. So again, thank you, Supervisor Fletcher. I really implore the rest of the supervisors to please support this effort. Again, and thank you for your leadership. You've done a great job during this crisis.
Thank you. Our next caller is 9886.
Good afternoon. My name is Joanne Fields. I am the Government and Public Relations Director for the Asian Pacific Islander Initiative. We did sign on to the San Diego API Coalition to support this initiative that was brought forth by Supervisor Fletcher. We also want to thank Supervisor Greg Cox for bringing this as an item on today's agenda. But I do want to remind people how large this Asian Pacific Islander umbrella entails. It's very different from North County to South County to City Heights. That Asians include Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Thai, Lao, and Pacific Islanders are usually left out of the equation, but includes Native Hawaiian, Chamorro, Samoan, Tongan, and so many more. And of course, Filipino, which according to the U.S. Census is nearly half of the API community. But yet, in instances like COVID-19 pandemic, I invite you to check out the county's webpage on resources and materials. There is information in API languages. I didn't see any in PI, but in Asian languages, it is not equal across the board. So Human Relations Commission would help bring light to these inequities that should be addressed and not be overlooked. Because in the South Bay, we have the highest number of positive cases. Filipinos, we have Spanish surnames. We also have many interracial marriages. I'm Joanne Fields, I'm full Filipino, but you may not think that with a last name of Fields. So we can't assume just by name only. This data collection that we have currently with Census 2020, I want to continue to push that because it is very important to the Human Relations Commission, the COVID-19, on where resources and information is distributed in what languages. So thank you, and please vote for the Leon Williams Human Relations Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 3640.
Thank you. My name's David Garcias. I'm president of SEIU Local 221, representing about 10,000, 11,000 county workers. As the president of SEIU Local 221, I want to let you know that we signed up for a group presentation, but I will be the only speaker. At the end of my comments, I'm hoping to have a video played with comments from Iris Dramel, who is the chair of our SEIU African American Action Committee. SEIU is committed to a society where all working people are valued and respected. no matter where we come from or what color we are. We believe in creating a world where all families and communities can thrive. And we believe in leaving a better and more equitable world for generations to come. And we are clear, particularly at this moment, that there is no economic justice without racial justice. SEIU uses its voice and power to fight for change across connected issues of workers' rights, wealth and income inequality, racial justice, immigration, access to quality and affordable health care, and climate change. That is why we support the Leon Williams Human Relations Commission as a vehicle to shine a spotlight on inequality and pursue equity for all San Diegans, regardless of our color or where we come from. As a Latino and a military veteran, during my service, I observed our military came closer to representing our society with a diversity of color and background in our leaders and decision makers, soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen. As you may also recognize, the board does not particularly reflect the diversity of our county. This commission is a step towards bringing San Diego closer to achieving this vision. Thank you.
Thank you. And the video that you had provided is not, doesn't appear to be compatible with any of the equipment in the board chamber, but we will figure out if we can get that to work and post it to our website in the section with the backup material for all the other materials that go with item 26. So we apologize for that, but we will work to get that, make that available for the public.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our final speaker is 0580.
Hello, my name is Marianne Hausman, and I'm here on behalf of Mid-City Can. I want to thank Supervisor Fletcher and his team for working to reinstate this commission. I greatly appreciate the effort that you all have done to reach out to numerous community partners and stakeholders. And really, I'm glad to hear that you will be amending the proposal to include representation of our API community. At MCC, we are committed towards working towards racial justice and equity and deeply understand the importance of decision-making boards such as these in making that reality. And I believe that this commission is critical and really necessary in working towards a more inclusive region that addresses the injustice faced by marginalized communities. It is really essential that we create a reflective body that will work towards meeting the needs of those most impacted by rape and hate crimes. And I really hope that in addition to including representation of API communities, that you will also consider Muslim representation to formally be a part of the commission as well, especially considering the significant Islamophobia that our community continues to face to this day, even here in our county. But I want to reinstate my gratitude towards Supervisor Fletcher, and I really greatly encourage the Board of Supervisors to be in support of this proposal here before you today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And we have one additional caller. If you'd like to address the board on item 26, it's last four digits 2564.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. And I want to appreciate and recognize all the work that the supervisors have been doing. This is Francine Maxwell, NAACP branch president. All of you should have received a letter from the NAACP. We full-heartedly support the Human Relations Commission coming aboard. And we really appreciated being docketed, Supervisor Cox, on this day, which is Malcolm X's birthday. So to honor a living legend on a deceased legend's birthday is just phenomenal. We completely support this. It's needed in San Diego County. We just want to make sure that the supervisors have a conversation and that we make sure that it's going to be dedicated to effectiveness. And we're not quite sure, without having a dedicated staff and dedicated resources, if this commission can go on and sustain itself. We want this commission to be on for years to come. We want people's grandchildren's great-grandchildren to be able to come and partake in this commission. So I'm just asking that if the conversation can change a little bit, this is something that is just going to be phenomenal. It's named after a living legend. It's much needed and it's wonderful, but we really want to make sure that there's a conversation of effectiveness and longevity. Once again, I just want to thank County Board Supervisors Nathan Fletcher for bringing this back because I remember that it was going to be done back in February. And so I'm glad that all the kinks were worked out, but we're still just a little bit concerned and watchful versus the resources that we feel that are needed. Once again, thank you and have a great day.
Thank you. And I understand there may be a couple additional speakers. If you'd like to address the board on item 26, please call into the meeting now. In the meantime, perhaps Chairman Cox would like to take comments from the board.
Here we go. I know Supervisor Jacob had indicated she wanted to make some comments after the speaker. So Supervisor Jacob, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. First, I want to thank Supervisor Fletcher for bringing this item forward. There were two recent events, as was indicated earlier, in Santee, and along with last year's shooting in Poway, and troubling incidents nationally, too. These are ugly reminders that racism and hateful viewpoints remain a serious problem. That's very unfortunate. And we can't ignore or minimize these sad, vile, and sometimes violent acts. What happened in Santee and Poway has no place in these cities or any part of San Diego County. It is not who we are. I think a Human Relations Commission could give residents, community leaders, and law enforcement a venue for bringing folks together to address acts of bigotry and could, I hope, guide this region toward greater tolerance. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, did we pick up any other speakers?
We have not yet.
Okay. Maybe I'll make a few comments. I first want to thank all the speakers today that called in on this. I think the insight that you've shared is certainly critical as we discuss the action we're going to take on this item. I have no problem supporting the concept of a Human Relations Commission, and I'm particularly gratified to see the reference made in the title of this organization to Supervisor Leon Williams. I've had the chance to know Supervisor Williams, not as long as Diane probably, but almost as long. When I was mayor of Chula Vista, he actually appointed me as one of his appointees to the Charter Review Commission for the County of San Diego. And later, when I was up in Sacramento as the director of local government, Leon was serving as the president of the California State Association of Counties. So I worked very closely with him there. And then I succeeded him about 15 years later as president of the California Association of Counties. So I have a great bond and a great affection for Leon. I consider him a mentor to myself, and I know he's been a mentor to many others. So I appreciate the reference to Leon. I think there is a need for a Human Relations Commission. The one concern I have is as we look at the ordinance or the structure of this, the resolution, it raises some questions in my mind in regards to the composition. I don't have any problem with the entities that are identified here and the addition of the Asian Pacific Islander representative. But then I think, in San Diego County, practically 1 in 3 of our residents are Latino, and there's no representation, direct representation to the Latino community. One of the things I brought up during the State of the County was I wanted to really see a way to get more youth involved in our county commissions. This is a perfect example of a commission that I think just cries to have some youth representation. And I would think maybe the commission could be made larger. Obviously, it went from 25 to 26. I'd like to suggest maybe there be 5 more appointees that each supervisor would make to have a youth representative from their district, so we get a greater diversity of viewpoints there. This is different from most commissions that we have, in that the Planning Commission is pretty well tied into the planning department. A lot of health and human services commissions that we have are tied into an agency. This is a type of a commission that is probably more like the Commission on the Status of Women. It's kind of has a broad field of vision. It's not tied into any specific department. And I think one of the speakers brought out the point that, okay, are you going to have some staffing for it? Well, there's no direct department you could say should staff this commission. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe we could certainly support the idea of having a Human Relations Commission, but refer to staff to kind of massage it a little bit more, identify if there is going to be a staffing issue, let's go ahead and identify that so we have our eyes wide open as we go into this, and come back with a report back in, say, 60 days, if that's a reasonable time period, so that we have a full gamut of view, and make sure that we have all the different entities that make up San Diego County that are represented on it. My purpose is not to delay it, but at the same time, I want to get it right the first time. And that's the concern that I have right now and moving forward with the composition as proposed. Further comments? Okay, do we have any other speakers?
Mr. Chairman, we have not received any additional requests to speak on this item.
Okay. Let me ask Supervisor Fletcher, how would you address, some of these groups that aren't included, and are you willing to maybe have some youth appointees?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Cox. We did countless stakeholder meetings in order to arrive at the best possible composition. Of course, you could have a group of 200 to 300 to 400 people and still not address, as one of our API members mentioned, there's probably 20 to 25 different members from different sectors of that industry. And so I think sending it to staff is going to be giving them a insurmountably difficult task and trying to wade through the difficulties of those, which is why we had multiple commission nominee spots where the commissioners could begin to identify some of those gaps and fill them. And so I do think that the time is of the essence a little in getting it moving. I like the idea and suggestion of adding a youth appointee. And so I think we could have each supervisor have an additional appointment. That would be 3, but that one would be designated for youth. And then I think that every supervisor can individually help address any of those groups that are missing. So between 5 supervisors, that'd be 15 appointments, and each of them could begin to fill in gaps of groups that they think should be better represented or more clearly represented. And then if there's a need, as the commission gets formed, if they feel a need that there's a specific group that should be added, then certainly they can make a recommendation to the board as a whole to say, we really think this is a gap or that is a gap, and then we can come back and make adjustments to it. And so I'd be more than happy to support adding an additional spot for each supervisor for a youth. And then I would just point out that there are a number of nominees here that are not specifically designated in order to allow us to fill the gaps. And then, like I said, the commission as a whole, when they begin meeting, they can begin identifying any changes, and then they can make suggestions back, and our board can consider modifying the composition. It is kind of a living and breathing body, and that might be a healthy compromise that allows it to get moving.
Is that agreeable to the second?
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if you're going to make that, is the intent to adopt this resolution?
Yes.
Okay, so if the intent is to adopt the resolution, then we need to make sure that we know exactly what the resolution is going to be saying. And so looking at
I can help you. I can help you, Mr. Counsel. It would, instead of where it says each supervisor shall appoint 2 members, it would say each supervisor shall appoint 3 members, with one of those members representing the youth community.
Okay.
And would that be in district or out of district allowable?
I think most of ours are in district, but I don't think we've ever really held to that. And so I wouldn't see that we would need to be held to in district. I don't really feel strongly either way. If anyone has a strong feeling.
Excellent. And do we have an age consideration of what is a youth under 18?
Supervisor Cox, your opinion of that may be different than mine.
Well, I think usually 16 to 24, that's kind of what we use for foster kids.
And it shall, and the resolution does say that it will be within the district. So it would be a constituent of the district that you'd be appointing.
Supervisor Gaspar, would you prefer to change that?
I think it would be nice to have a little bit of flexibility. Our young people are tied up in a lot of activities these days, especially since they're all trying to strive for 5.0 grade point averages. So it'd be nice to have some flexibility there.
I'm not opposed to striking the requirement of in-district.
Just to clarify, Supervisor Fletcher, does that apply to the two non-youth appointees as well?
I think that would be fine.
And Mr. Chairman, we did receive one more call-in comment on this item.
Let's go ahead and take it.
Yes, thank you. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board 5192. Or you'll have 2 minutes to address the board. Last four digits are 5192.
Yeah, this is Reverend Shane Harris, President of the People's Alliance for Justice. As a longtime human rights and civil rights activist, I wanted to make sure to call in to share Supervisor Cox's concerns. I think that they're valid, and I wanted to make sure to provide some input. I happen to know Supervisor Leon Williams myself and have been at this for a long time, and I understand the importance of having a commission, but to validate Supervisor Cox's stance on this commission being fully prepared and having all of the representation that matters across our county and the different diverse communities and the different angles and sides and age groups. I'm asking that the recommendations that this would be passed through with the recommendations that Supervisor Cox has brought forth. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have no other callers on the line at this point.
Is there a request from any other supervisors to speak on this item?
Chairman Cox, we just received one more caller. Would you like to go ahead and hear from the final speaker on this item?
Sure, why not? Go ahead.
Thank you. 7450.
Good afternoon. This is Rabbi Zalman Kalamov. I'm the leader of About Downtown in the downtown Jewish community. And obviously, you've heard from a few rabbis and you've heard from many different faith-based organizations. And we'd like to thank everyone for getting on board with this very important Relations Commission. I'd like to thank Supervisor Fletcher for all his work for the larger community. I also serve as a chaplain in the San Diego fire, and we have seen an influx of a lot of anti-Semitism, and also humanity and understanding is the direction that we have to take today. As it's not good enough just to sit back and let evil rule, but we have to be proactive in doing this. And I believe that this effort, especially with the creation of the Leon L. Williams San Diego Human Rights Relations Commission, will do a tremendous amount in bringing awareness to our larger community. Thank you.
Thank you. And now that concludes public testimony on this item. Chairman Cox, thank you for bearing with us.
Let's vote before we get any more calls. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you, Chairman Cox. Chairman Cox, your vote, please.
Aye.
Supervisor Jacob?
Aye.
Supervisor Gaspar?
Aye.
Supervisor Fletcher?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Desmond?
Aye.
Chairman Cox, the motion passes unanimously with all board members being present and voting aye.
Very good. We'll move on to item 27, which is a support for state legislation SB 1090, coastal erosion installation of shoreline protection devices. This item was brought forward by Supervisor Gaspar, and I'll ask her if she'd like to make some introductory comments before we take the public caller.
Thank you, Chairman. San Diego County is home to one of the most beautiful coastlines in the country. We look forward to being able to use it fully soon. Our bluffs and coastlines naturally erode multiple times per year in Southern California, and San Diego County is no exception. On August 2nd, 2019, the city of Encinitas faced a tragic act of nature that took the lives of 3 residents and injured another after a cliff collapsed on a popular local stretch of beach. Ensuring public safety on our beaches is a top priority. Then on November 29, 2019, following heavy rains, a significant section of Del Mar Bluffs collapsed within feet of the adjacent train tracks. San Diego County needs to take steps to help mitigate future coastal erosion and protect beachgoers and critical infrastructure. So today's recommended action will direct the CAO to draft a letter of support for State Senate Bill 1090. You may have heard Congressman Levin talk about this before, which would require the California Coastal Commission or local jurisdiction to approve a proactive repair, maintenance, or construction of shoreline protection devices to protect lives and critical infrastructure. And this bill is being brought forward by Senator Pat Bates. I want to thank the bipartisan coalition that's come together, united and committed to proactive solutions and the protection of human life. And thank you in advance to my colleagues for your support on this item today.
Okay, I believe we have one speaker.
Chairman Cox, yes, we have one request to speak on this item.
Correct.
I'll note for the record that we received 31 e-comments, and we'll go ahead and call the speaker. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board.
Yes, if 6979, if you could please state your name for the record.
This is Pam Hetherington from the Environmental Center of San Diego. Thank you for your time today. SB 1090 plays favorites. It allows a few wealthy landowners to dictate the fate of the beach for the rest of us. The science is sound. Shoreline armoring structures undercut the beach, hasten coastal erosion at the armored site and surrounding properties. This is not coastal resource protection. And this legislation will have a fiscal impact. Our beaches are revenue producers that affect every inch of San Diego. When the beaches start disappearing, so will the revenue. In this financial crisis, why would you jeopardize this huge source of revenue? All e-comments on this item are unanimously against it last time I checked. Comments from Scripps Institute of Oceanography, geologists, the Surfrider Foundation, and every beachgoer. Remember, the Coastal Act was overwhelmingly supported by the people of California. As importantly, armoring privatizes the benefits for coastal landowners while passing the cost to the public. The beach is an equalizer. It gives outdoor space to the less fortunate and a stake in the future of our coast for everyone. We encourage you to live up to your motto about the noblest motive being the public good. And remember, the beach belongs to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes public testimony on this item, Chairman Cox.
Supervisor Gaspar, did you want to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve. Thank you.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second the motion. Supervisor Desmond.
Okay, discussion?
Real quick, Mr. Chair, I will be brief. I know we have a lot of work left to do. I share the concerns of the California Coastal Commission that opposed this bill, Surfrider Foundation, California League of Conservation Voters, California Protection Network, California Coastkeeper Alliance, and others. We do know that coastal erosion is an issue and a challenge. I do not believe that the science surrounding coastal action and the appropriate nature are best expressed by this bill, and so I'll be opposing the motion today.
Okay, further discussion? If not, would the clerk go ahead and call the roll?
Thank you. Chairman Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Jacob?
Aye.
Supervisor Gaspar? Supervisor Gaspar?
Aye.
Supervisor Fletcher?
Fletcher, no.
Vice Chairman Desmond?
Aye.
Chairman Cox, that motion passes with Supervisor Fletcher voting no, all other supervisors being present and voting aye.
Very good. We'll move on now to item 18, which is the fiscal year 2019-2020 third quarter operational plan status report and budget adjustments. The report for staff is going to be given by Ebony Shelton, who is the Financial Policy and Planning Director for the Office of Financial Planning. So Ebony, if you'd like to go ahead and take it away.
Yes. Chairman Cox and members of the board, today we bring forward the third quarter budget status report. During my last presentation to you on March 10th, while there were some indications of risk, the magnitude of the economic impacts we're currently experiencing were unexpected, to say the least. Today, through this update, we as an organization are analyzing our position in preparation for the upcoming budget while moving forward in an environment of significant uncertainty. To provide specific context on the effects of our local decision-making environment, I'll start with key economic indicators, including our projected year-end budget results. Next, I'll present the anticipated negative revenue impacts, followed with a discussion of expected expenditure increases and a look at the short and long-term impacts on the general fund. We'll end with a discussion on the road ahead. So let's begin. No region has been spared from the devastating impact of the global pandemic, and our local economy is being impacted. This chart shows the annual unemployment rates back to 2009 compared with monthly data for 2020. It's clear that business closures are resulting in more people out of work across the state, nationally, and here locally as well. National unemployment spiked in April, and when state and county numbers are released, we expect to see dramatic increases. SANDAG's most recent update for the week ending May 2nd puts local unemployment at a staggering 28.7%. In looking at the national economy, we've seen a significant downturn. The chart on the top is changes in GDP, which measures the size of our economy and our economic health. January through March, U.S. GDP shrank at an annual rate of 4.8% and is forecasted by Fitch Ratings to shrink by 5.6% this year. This is the first quarterly drop in 6 years and the sharpest since 2008. Although there have been federal efforts to bolster the economy, Federal Reserve Chairman Powell late last week urged the White House and Congress to act further to prevent a prolonged, sustained recession. The bottom charts show financial market performance. Sharp drops are seen in March, with modest recovery signaling some confidence from investors in economic recovery. So next, let's turn to the county's third quarter budget status report. Overall, we're projecting to end the year with positive results of $148.5 million for all funds, including $88.4 million in the general fund. For the general fund, this compares to projections of $118 million in March. It's important to keep in mind that much of the fiscal year had elapsed prior to the onset of this economic crisis. With that in mind, roughly half of the general fund projection is being projected now by one-time capital project funds that will help to fund future capital projects. The general fund results, which are usually drove largely by operations across the county departments, only make up $22 million of this amount. General purpose revenues are projected to fall short of budget by $11 million compared to the $20 million surplus that was projected in the second quarter. Any remaining balances at year-end become a key one-time resource for balancing the coming year's budget, and we're planning to do just that. With that as context, let's look at the revenue outlook for the county. As you've heard in previous updates from our Chief Financial Officer, the anticipated range of the revenue shortfalls the county is anticipating is between $260 and $395 million. This slide provides highlights of the estimated impacts to key program and general purpose revenues. The summary includes estimated impacts to revenues in the current year and projections for the next 2 years. These amounts represent shortfalls, that is, revenue the county planned for but will not realize. By far, the most significant impacts are expected in our sales tax-based revenues. So let's look at that trend a little more closely. This slide shows the county's historical and projected sales tax revenues, with the black line projecting total dollars and the brown bars representing the percent of change year over year. As seen in this chart, the county's reliance on sales tax revenue over time has increased significantly due to changes in service delivery models at the state. Overall, sales tax dollars are expected to be less this year than last year, and looking forward, projections assume negative growth. These revenues are not expected to recover to 18-19 levels until 23-24. So next, let's talk about property tax revenues. This slide shows the county's historical and actual projected revenues for general purpose property tax revenue dollars. We'll focus on the brown bars, which indicate the percentage change in property tax revenue. The 2008 recession was triggered, of course, by a housing crisis, so we're not seeing the same steep declines going forward at this time. The slowing growth rate that's being forecasted reflects an increase in delinquent property tax payments. The assessor is expecting property tax values overall to grow by 3.75% this year, which is a slight improvement from our last update. However, for next year, the rate of growth for property values has been decreased from the original 3% estimate to now 2%. Next, I'll share the outlook for key expenditure drivers and budgetary impacts in the general fund moving forward. This slide shows the annual investment return of the retirement fund since 2009 through March, the latest information that's available. The fiscal year-to-date earnings were at a negative 8%. April returns haven't been released yet, but we're expecting some improvement, albeit we still anticipate that we'll have negative returns. Accordingly, we're preparing for the fund to not meet the assumed rate of return this year and the associated county cost increases beginning in fiscal year 21-22, which we'll review next. Here we see the county's total cost of retirement. The projections reflect the impact of decreases from the current assumed rate of return of 7% to 6.5% by 2025. The projections also assume market losses of 7% this year, represented by the blue portion of the bars. Headed into next year, our annual total estimated pension-related costs are estimated to be $708 million and expected to peak at over $1 billion in fiscal year 25-26. The UAL would increase from today's level of $4 billion to a peak of $6.5 billion under those same set of assumptions. Collectively, all the factors that we've talked about up to this point are anticipated to impact general fund needs going forward. I'd like to quickly refresh you first on the projections that I presented to you in March, and then we'll go over the collective impacts of the information that we've reviewed today. So this chart represents information that was presented in March based on the needs of the general fund at that time that were not anticipated to be covered by program revenues, which are also referred to as general fund net cost. Focusing on the chart, the gray bars represent projected general purpose revenue, and the black line represents expenses that rely on those revenues. This black line represents what were forecasted as unavoidable costs required to sustain service levels over the long term and to address known priorities of the board. Focusing on the chart, the gray bars represent, let me move on. While there were known risks at that time, we were prepared to move through them with the leadership of the board. For comparison, now I'll turn to how this outlook has changed. So this next chart here represents the needs of the general fund today. So you can see a stark contrast based on the gap between the black line, which represents expenditures, and the blue bars, which represent revenues. So here you can see there's a structural imbalance that's projected to grow and peak by over $200 million in the years ahead. And I have to emphasize that this amount is based on budget strategies that are actively under development, and that may change before the budget is finalized. In addition, this gap doesn't reflect the potential impacts resulting from the May revise. The three key drivers that are creating the gap are lower than anticipated general purpose revenues. You can see from 1920 to 2021, those amounts are expected to be flat. Also included in the black line are expenditure impacts of negative returns on the retirement system and program revenue shortfalls that are not currently anticipated to be impacted through other mitigation strategies. Since the board is legally required to adopt a balanced budget annually, it's critical that the county immediately identify a combination of revenue solutions and cost containment strategies, and we are working to do just that. To balance the budget for the next 2 years, the gaps are recommended to be solved by using reserves, allowing time to make necessary adjustments long-term, while not adding to the additional economic stress to the region. To put it plainly, this slide shows us that we can't afford to continue business as usual after the pandemic, and cuts will be necessary. To understand how the budget balancing strategy is anticipated to impact our financial position, I'll share with you next the unassigned fund balance outlook. And I'm going to walk you through this chart, starting with the year-end balance at June 30, 2019, which was $712 million. This year, through various actions, the board has approved the use of $74 million of last year's balance, which must be subtracted. Next, we add in the projected year-end operating results in the general fund of $88.4 million. And finally, we subtract the $136.2 million that we're planning to use to balance next year's budget. The net impact of these type of adjustments will ultimately drive the figure we see reported in our balance sheet for June 30, 2020. And as of right now, that projected amount is $590.3 million. The administrative code requires maintaining a minimum reserve equal to 2 months of operating expenses. And we project that that minimum will be $707 million based on projected expending levels year to date. Which means that we won't meet that requirement. In addition, estimates indicate that further draws below the minimum are needed to cover the 21-22 estimated budget shortfall, and that amount is $134.2 million at this point. So looking ahead, the fact of the matter is that we are crafting a multi-year budget solution in an environment of incredible uncertainty, which means that this plan is not without risk. Risk and uncertainty are inevitable in this environment, so let's talk about what we do know and what we're doing to get prepared. So many analysts see substantial changes in the economy that may constrain future growth as people remain too fearful and we face continued limits on daily activities. Like the coronavirus, economic melees may linger longer than we expect. And we're relying on the use of reserves to balance the budget. And this is a one-time funding source, and once it's gone, it must be replenished as a hedge against future risks, which is contemplated in the outlook that I shared with you today. We continue to monitor and engage with our partners at the federal and state levels to leverage additional resources, including any future stimulus actions, bearing in mind that they're not immune from the economic impacts of the pandemic, which leads us to the subject of the May revise. So released late last week, the May revise reflected the projected overall state budget deficit of $54 billion compared to the $5.6 billion surplus that was anticipated in January. And similar to our approach, the governor is proposing to use a multitude of revenue and cost containment strategies, including the use of reserves to close the gap, while also looking to additional resources from the federal government to provide support that would otherwise result in additional trigger cuts. We'll be monitoring the status of the HEROES Act as it makes its way through the Senate from both the state as well as from the local perspective. The county's analysis of the state budget is ongoing, but preliminarily, the most significant impacts include the shifting of responsibility for offenders from the state's Division of Juvenile Justice and distribution of CARES Act funding to all counties, with the County of San Diego share estimated at $54 million. A complete analysis of the local impacts will be made available to your board as well as to the public soon. Next, I'll turn to local policy changes being recommended today in support of budget balancing strategies. Included in the third quarter status report is a recommendation to ratify the CAO's action to suspend certain financial provisions of the administrative code. Specific actions being requested include actions to allow the uses of unassigned fund balances drawing below the minimum target, to suspend requirements to use savings from maturing debt to cash fund capital or make voluntary contributions to SD-SARA, and finally to suspend requirements to direct one-time revenues from better than anticipated assessed value to the retirement system. These actions are necessary to provide financial flexibility and are just a few of the tools that we have in our financial first aid toolkit. There are other actions that are being taken to mitigate short and long-term impacts as well, which we'll discuss next. The county's leadership team is actively working to make revisions to budget recommendations. Changes will be proposed to scale back operations and to contain cost. There are a suite of general principles that are guiding the development of recommendations as the organization crafts budget solutions. Unless previously approved by the board, the core approach for non-essential services assumes that there will be no new programs or expansion of programs and no additional staffing. There will be exceptions for previously approved staffing additions or increases for emergency response. In conclusion, we are preparing to manage through a sustained economic downturn and to ensure continued fiscal stability in the future. I look forward to continued updates to your board and the community in the coming months. And subject to your questions, that concludes my presentation.
Okay, are there any questions for Ebony?
Yes. Supervisor Desmond here.
Yeah, go ahead, Supervisor.
Thanks. See, Ebony, thank you for the report, as grim as it is. I understand in the administrative codes that we're asking us to suspend that the either you or the CAO is supposed to come back to the board with a plan of paying back those reserves from 1 to 3 years is my understanding currently. I'd also like to find out, I guess, as we have further discussions, maybe as the board, if there's a floor that we're willing to go to potentially with the reserves. I guess you come back every time so that we would be determining that. My understanding is we're spending about 130 million or 110 million, I guess, of the reserves right now, which still, it's less than the 2 months that we have. I guess what I'd like to, find out what the strategy is moving forward. I'd even be willing, when you come back with a repayment plan for those use of those reserves, I know it's from 1 to 3 years. I'd also be willing to look at a 5-year plan to see what it might take to pay back the reserves over 5 years. Hopefully we won't get the pandemics that often and or the use of the reserves. So I guess not that we'd adopt it, but I'd also like to see kind of the glide slope for not only 1 and 3, but also 5 years to pay back the reserves.
Included in the outlook that was presented today, there is a 3-year replenishment strategy included in that outlook to replenish the amount that we're planning to draw down below the minimum. But we can come back with additional options to talk about a 5-year as well.
Well, and I guess as the further we get into this, we may incur more costs than we are aware of right now. And so I just want to make sure we've got options. I don't really want to go to a 5-year plan, but if that's an easier pill to swallow than the 3, it might be at least I'd like to see what those are as compared to the 3. So thank you.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Jacob.
I noticed that on the required contribution to the retirement fund, is the plan only to contribute what is required, not anything over that? I wasn't clear on that.
That is correct.
Okay. And yeah, I think we have to be really careful with the reserves. That 700 million is 2 months of operations, normal operations, and we're certainly not in normal times. So I'm interested in a plan if we're dipping into them. Again, how, you don't need to answer it right now, but that 134 million that we're dipping into reserves, I'd like to have more details on how that's being spent.
Absolutely. It's current, the majority of it by far is to address the revenue shortfalls that we don't have mitigation strategies in place for, but there also is a combination of one-time expenses such as capital.
Yeah, well, I'd like to have a little more specifics on that. Exactly what are we talking about in terms of programs, services? We have a capital improvement plan that we'll get to. I don't know if we're getting to it today, the CENA today or tomorrow, but and we'll be able to know more on that. But I'd like to have a little more detail on what we're really dipping into those reserves for. It may or may not be a priority of the board, and I think we have to look at that very carefully.
Supervisor, you will get a little glimpse of that as we go through the CINA on the next item. You'll also have a very detailed look at that when we publish our budget here. So we're in the midst of preparing that document, as you're aware, and we'll be bringing that forward publicly in July and then having our hearings in August. And that's where all of our expenditures will be very visibly discussed. Thank you.
Okay, so Helen, then it hasn't been determined what the allocations are going to be in that 134 million that we're dipping into the reserves on?
Supervisor, we have given some preliminary data to the departments to help them in preparing their budgets. So we've prepared the guidelines for them, and we are receiving those inputs back, and that is what Ebony has totaled up to come up with what that estimate is. So that is what they are driving to in their budgets. It could be worse. We hope not. And then we will certainly be reviewing that as part of our budget process.
Okay, and so you'll make recommendations. And my point, I think the board needs to look at that very carefully to see, are those the board's priority or not?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All comments by supervisors? Seeing none, we do have a series of recommendations from the Chief Administrative Officer, numbered 1 through 11. I'm not going to repeat them all, but if there's no further discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Do we have a motion?
Oh, yeah, I guess it would help to have a motion. Supervisor.
I'll make a motion to approve the CAO's recommendation.
All right, is there a second? Supervisor Desmond, why don't you say yes?
I don't know, you cut out there, but yes, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Jacobs, seconded by Vice Chair Desmond. Any further discussion? If not, would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you, Chairman Cox.
Aye.
Supervisor Jacob.
Aye.
Supervisor Gaspar.
Aye.
Supervisor Fletcher.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Desmond.
Aye.
Chairman Cox, that motion passes unanimously with all board members being present and voting aye.
Okay, what I'd like to ask my colleagues' indulgence is to go ahead and deal with item 19 today and try to get that out of the way. We will take the adjournments in memory and do those tomorrow after the land use hearing, and also the closed session will be after the land use hearing tomorrow. If there's no objection, we'll move on to item 19. And item 19 is going to be presented by Marco Medved, the Director of General Services.
Thank you, Chairman Cox and members of the board. Today, Brian Albright and I will present the annual CINA program. As you just heard in the third quarter economic update, we're taking a hard look at the capital program as a result of the COVID impacts. We're recommending to continue as much of the capital program as possible while minimizing new funds allocated. We'll use this time to pause certain projects for a year until we can get a better picture of our financial outlook. We'll also use this time to implement a new planning process that allows us to better manage our capital portfolio that includes over 1,200 facilities and 50,000 acres of land. To sustain our facilities and parks portfolio at Live Well standards, General Services has been working with staff to refine the CINA process. The resulting CINA 2.0 will provide a better framework for prioritizing and funding capital projects. This new approach is a phased one that still results in recommendations for the operational plan, but it also will produce a 5-year planning forecast that will drive our capital program. Individual projects identified in department strategic facility plans or in board-directed initiatives will be added to the CINA and will progress through 2 phases. Funding will be requested initially for pre-construction. During this phase, a site will be identified and requested, identified and acquired. CEQA and site planning efforts will be forwarded and due diligence efforts will be conducted. Additionally, the operational department will estimate operating costs of the proposed facility to include any new positions required to appropriately staff the facility. Once the pre-construction phase is complete, the project will be recommended for construction, the second step. The recommendation developed for this phase will include a budget quality estimate of the cost to construct and to open the facility. The preparation of the CENA is guided by Board Policy G16, Capital Facilities Planning. Requested revisions to the policy include a greater focus on the development of department strategic facility plans, engagement with the group managers earlier in the process to develop the 5-year strategic plan, and codifying the two-phased process for recommended projects. Between October and March, the Facility Planning Board and the county's general managers developed the current year's CENA. However, due to the COVID pandemic implications, the plan has been refined in April and May. The final CENA this year includes a recommendation of continue, pause, or cancel for every project. The estimated total cost of the county's capital program is over $2 billion. This figure includes future phases of projects and programs that extend beyond the 5-year time frame of the CENA. Projects that are recommended to continue have previously approved appropriations totaling $461 million. The funding request for this year's CENA that will be forwarded to the CAO for consideration for funding in the operational plan is $38.6 million. In addition to the program and project requirements, several other factors influence the timing of funding for individual projects. These include the readiness of the project for execution and its physical or fiscal phasing, the availability and timing of other funding sources, and the consideration of one-time funding availability. Staff is recommending that 55 projects on the CENA continue to move forward in fiscal year 2021. This represents approximately $500 million in funding for projects that are already in progress or close to contract award, and $38.6 million in new funding that's recommended to forward key pre-construction or construction efforts in behavioral health, public safety, parks, and climate action projects. Staff is recommending that a large number of projects be placed on hold this year. Previous appropriations for these projects will not be affected. Hitting the pause button on these projects for 1 or more years provides the county some room to adjust to the budget impacts of the COVID response. These projects will remain on the CENA and will be considered for funding at a later date. Included are 35 projects in this category. Several public safety projects are on the pause list, including the Rock Mountain Detention Facility renovation, the Ramona Fire Station, and the County Animal Shelter. We're also recommending a pause on pre-construction phase for several behavioral health and library projects. The Central Behavioral Health Hub at Hillcrest would defer design 1 year. However, demolition is proceeding now to prepare the site for development. 4 projects that were added to the CENA in previous years are recommended to be canceled, which will return $14.9 million to the original fund source in accordance with board policy. Of the projects that are recommended to continue, the following are in construction and valued at $204 million. The Juvenile Justice Campus project, shown here, is designed to support a new model of restorative justice, and demolition has just begun, starting our construction phase. The Ohio Street Probation Facility has already been demolished, and construction will start this fall. Construction will be complete in July on the Children and Teens addition to the Bonita Sunnyside Library. And the contractor broke ground on 24 March for the inmate tunnel downtown, and demolition of the old courthouse south block is now complete. And finally, the Emergency Vehicle Operation Course, or EVOC, is starting construction on a 40-acre site in East Otay Mesa, and will provide centralized facility for the public safety personnel and regional partners in the spring of '21. This slide shows that we're in design phase on 2 behavioral health facilities, a library, and 2 fire stations. The next slide shows that we're in pre-construction efforts are recommended to continue, and new funding is being requested for time-sensitive land acquisitions or to begin project planning. We've signed a letter of intent on a property for the innovative residential rehabilitation program, similar to the Other Side Academy in Utah. Although listed as a pause, the project may shift to continue based on the speed of the entitlements and the acquisition process. To fulfill the Ramona Intergenerational Community Center, or RIC master plan, we're recommending the purchases of over 7 acres of land for the development of affordable senior housing. The creation of a psychiatric unit inside Edgemoor Hospital is essential to the overall licensing strategy for the Behavioral Health Master Plan. To complete the phasing of the San Diego Juvenile Justice Campus and enable establishment of the Central Region Behavioral Health Hub for children and youth, it is recommended that planning for phases 2 and 3 be funded. Planning for a new fire station to serve East Otay Mesa will ensure timely facility development and adequate emergency response times in that region. Staff is recommending that funding for the Casa de Oro Library land acquisition be appropriated this year because it's been very difficult to secure a site in that community, and we've recently made some progress toward that end. Next, I'll turn it over to Brian to provide an overview on Parks and Rec capital programs. Brian.
Thank you, Marco. A significant portion of the CENA is the Parks and Recreation Capital Program. There's 68 active park projects comprising $645 million. Roughly $265 million is already funded, and $6.1 million is requested for funding in FY 2021 for 5 projects. 8 park projects valued at $26 million are currently under construction. This includes Estrella Park in Valle de Oro, the Botanic Gardens Horticulture Center in Encinitas, a new campground and outdoor education center in the Tijuana River Valley, and various improvement projects at other parks that focus on energy efficiency and expanding play opportunities. We are proposing that 33 projects in the CENA continue to move forward. These include parks that are under construction or in the final design stages, as well as projects that are close to contract award. Also included on the list to continue are projects that have grants or other non-general purpose revenue, such as CDBG and Parkland Dedication Ordinance funds. Some highlighted projects that will continue are Fallbrook Community Park, Lincoln Acres Park Expansion, 4G Park, and the restoration of Lindo Lake. We will also continue with playground replacements, energy upgrades, and water conservation improvements at multiple parks throughout the county. Marco mentioned a number of projects that are recommended to pause. One of these is the Multiple Species Conservation Program, which is the largest parks capital project. The MSCP conserves open space habitat and provides passive recreation in exchange for streamlined permitting that allows development to occur in less sensitive areas. Since 1998, the county has acquired approximately 23,000 acres of land, using $155 million in county funds to leverage an additional $95 million in grants from partners, including the state and federal government and nonprofit conservancies. We are ahead of schedule in meeting our long-term acquisition commitment, and we will be able to meet our land stewardship obligations without additional funding in FY 2021. Existing funding will enable us to continue to pursue approximately 10 land acquisitions in the coming fiscal year. That concludes the overview of the Parks Capital Program, and I'll turn it back over to Marco to outline our recommendations.
Thanks, Brian. In closing, the recommendations before you are to approve the CENA for fiscal years 20 through 25 and refer the plan to the CAO for budget consideration. In addition, we're requesting that your board approve the changes to Board Policy G16 so the policy aligns more with our rigorous capital planning process. And finally, we ask that you approve the cancellation of appropriations and related revenue for 4 projects, which will return $14.9 million to the general fund and program funds. And this concludes our presentation, and we're available for your questions.
Okay. Are there questions to staff? I do know that we have a request to speak from the sheriff, and I think he has a video. If there aren't any direct questions to staff right now, we can proceed with the sheriff's presentation, if that's okay. Why don't we go ahead and call on the sheriff at this time?
Thank you, Chairman Cox and members of the board. Thank you for letting me make this. We'll try to make it a brief presentation in light of the hour. First of all, I'm joined here today by Under Sheriff Mike Barnett and our facilities manager, Chris Thibodeau. And I want to preface my remarks by acknowledging the fact I realize these are very, very challenging times, and I know a lot of hard work was put in by Marco and Helen and Holly. And I know there's tough decisions, very, very tough decisions to be made. what we're asking the board to consider today is to move the Rock Mountain renovation project from 21-22 to this current fiscal year of 2021. That's a $38 million project, of which this board has already appropriated $15.7 million. It's not that finishing Rock Mountain in and of itself is so important. It's what it does for the rest of our detention facilities. By finishing the renovations at Rock Mountain, we will then be able to address the long overdue major maintenance issues that are facing us at George Bailey and the Vista Detention Facilities, our oldest facilities in our system. Because of the inattention or lack of major maintenance, there become safety issues, not only at those facilities for our inmates, but for our staff. As this board knows, we have, starting back in February in anticipation of the COVID-19 pandemic, we started looking at ways to lower our population in our jails. We brought the population down from 5,600 to 4,200. And then with the implementation of the zero bail order by the Judicial Council last month, we brought it down another 400. The last count I thought was 37 or 3,800. This brings up the question, well, you have enough space now, can you move people around your facility? It's obvious we can't do major maintenance in a module with inmates in there. They have to go someplace. Well, the question may ask, well, can we move them now with that space we've freed up because of the pandemic? That would just defeat all the purpose of making that space for the pandemic, of social distancing, creating isolation and quarantine modules for infected and suspected infected inmates. So that's really not a solution, and not until we get through the pandemic. Once we get through the pandemic, you ask the question, well, can we keep our jail population numbers at 3,700 and then do the renovations? The answer to that simply is just no, we can't. That would be trading one, in my opinion, trading one crisis, the pandemic, for another crisis, which would be in the public safety area. And I'm going to turn it over to Under Sheriff Mike Barnett to further describe what we're talking about as far as the changes we made in the downsizing of our jails. So, Mike, he's right behind me.
Thank you, Sheriff. It's a pleasure to be here with the chairman and the members of the Board of Supervisors. At the outset of this pandemic, as the sheriff mentioned, we undertook steps to control our jail population. We implemented more restrictive booking criteria and granted early release to most sentenced inmates. Those measures, along with strict inmate and staff health screening, surveillance, hygiene, and sanitation protocols, have kept our jail population at a manageable level. Today, we have just one COVID-19 positive inmate in our custody. We have thus far avoided the severe outbreaks seen in some other jail systems around the country. In April, the Judicial Council of California instituted a strict zero bail policy. The result of that was a further drop in our inmate population, which today stands at 3,749 inmates, down almost 2,000 from our pre-pandemic levels and only 62% of our rated capacity. So, a reasonable question is, why can't we keep the population at that level in perpetuity? Ladies and gentlemen, we can't. At least we can't without keeping dangerous criminals on the street. I have a stack of case studies on my desk detailing people arrested and given a citation to appear in court months down the road and released in the field with no bail and leaving us with no optimism they will honor their promise to appear in court. In the interest of time, I will only highlight a couple of cases. Just yesterday, Escondido Police published a media release describing how a local man was arrested, cited, and released 4 times in 12 days. Each time, he was driving a stolen car and released as a result of the zero bail order. Finally, just this past Saturday, the suspect stabbed a local homeless person in the neck and is now in custody for attempted murder. Earlier today, we arrested a man in San Diego in possession of 4,000 fentanyl pills. Last week, he was cited and released after being caught with 59 pounds of methamphetamine. The integrity of the entire criminal justice system is compromised when convicted criminals, duly sentenced by a judge, are released after serving just a fraction of their sentence. Victims are left wondering why, and the public is put at risk. These drastically lower jail populations are simply not sustainable. To do so would turn our public health emergency into a public safety emergency. Our Support Services Director, Chris Thibodeau, will soon outline the history and need for this project and how completing it as soon as possible reduces the risk of having to permanently resort to a lower jail population with all the resultant consequences. In the event the crumbling infrastructure at one of our aged facilities necessitates a partial or complete closure. Completing this facility will allow us to dedicate more space throughout the system for enhanced observation housing for our mentally ill and at-risk population. It will provide for more protective custody housing for that constantly ballooning population that needs to be separated from the general inmate population. It will eliminate the need for triple bunking, which is still required in some of our highest security housing due to a lack of high-level housing system-wide. As we have reduced the jail population, it is the lower risk population that is being released or not booked. The high-level violent criminals remain in custody right now, and we lack adequate cell housing for them. The Rock Mountain Detention Facility will solve that problem. Thank you, and I now ask Mr. Thibodeau to come forward.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Just some background. The former Corrections Corporation of America facility reverted to the County of San Diego and the Sheriff's Department in January of 2016. Prior to that, in September 2015, the Board of Supervisors had approved the advertisement and award of a construction manager at risk contract and appropriations of $9.7 million. On December 11, 2018, the board established additional appropriations for $6 million to increase funding to the current level of $15.7 million due to added scope for required security upgrades. The original construction firm, Reno Contracting, was terminated for cause on March 25, 2019 due to failure to bond. After a new advertisement and procurement process, a new contract was awarded to Turner Construction Company in July of 2019, and pre-construction services began. The current estimate for construction is $38 million, significantly higher than the current appropriations. In order to occupy this facility, significant renovations and system upgrades are needed. These include the integrated electronic security and control system, the fire alarms and sprinklers, major electrical upgrades, plumbing, mechanical, communications, as well as kitchen, housing unit and cell upgrades, lighting, and security fencing. Renovation of this facility is required to create adequate additional bed space to facilitate much-needed renovations of other aged facilities and handle population growth. Rock Mountain cannot be occupied without these renovations. The one-time cost to fully renovate and open Rock Mountain is $38 million, requiring an additional ask of $22.3 million. Rock Mountain will consist of 6 housing units, of which Facility 8 is already occupied and currently being administered through George Bailey, which will give us 1,250 additional beds. While this one-time request may seem high, it is a fraction of the cost for construction of a new facility of a similar size. The recently completed Benoit Detention Facility in Indio came at a cost of $376 million for 1,300 new beds, basically $290,000 per bed. Our costs are expected to be $32,000 per bed to renovate Rock Mountain. Rock Mountain would be fully operational by the completion of construction. Assuming additional appropriations are included in the FY 2021 operational plan, the construction of Rock Mountain can start as soon as September and be completed by March 2022. Completing Rock Mountain in its entirety would allow us to begin a phased renovation of George Bailey over the next 2 years. We would also, at a future time, be able to address much-needed renovations of the Vista Detention Facility, our oldest facility in constant operation since 1978. The overall intent, once these facilities are completed, is to be able to close South Bay Detention Facility other than court holding at a significant savings. The major scope items and cost drivers are below. Items like the Americans for Disability Act requirements were additive after a 2019 accessibility survey. When Turner got in and started doing their pre-construction, they discovered that the 2 transformers on site should not be used for exterior outdoor use, and those alone added over $2 million in scope to the project cost. Items like rekeying, electrical, mechanical, the fencing and security rework quickly add up. In addition to that, we're dealing with 5 years of escalation fees and added contingency as the project scope and price have increased. Finally, the recommendation is that you advance and fund within the Capital Improvement Needs Assessment the Rock Mountain Detention Facility renovation project in fiscal year 2021 rather than in fiscal year 21-22. Thank you, and we stand ready for your questions if there are any.
Okay, I have one question of a representative from the Sheriff's Department. What were the request is for 22.3, but is there some funding that the sheriff's has available that would knock that figure down?
Yes, sir. There's $1 million available in inmate welfare and $2 million from the Criminal Justice Facility Construction Fund. So it becomes $19.3 million in as yet to be identified appropriations.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions of the sheriff?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of questions. Do we know what the savings would be closing South Bay?
In overhead and maintenance alone, it's $2 million annually in today's dollars.
But you talked about when all the renovations are done, that you would be closing South Bay. So is all we would save the operation maintenance, or is there potential savings in doing something else with that facility? In other words, what's going to happen to the facility?
Thank you for that excellent question. We would turn over the majority of that facility back to county use to identify whatever use it may want to do. We would only need to maintain minimal housing on one floor to take care of the court inmates that come to the South Bay Courthouse on a daily basis.
So you wouldn't be closing that facility permanently, is that correct?
We would not house any inmates there overnight ever again, is our plan. But all the staff would transfer to the Rock Mountain Detention Facility.
I'm really concerned, your presentation on the no bail and letting all these criminals out on our streets. I mean, are you all as concerned as I am right now with what you presented to us about a potential public safety issue going forward?
Supervisor, I hope that my concern was relayed appropriately during my presentation. Yes, ma'am. It is a significant problem. We're citing and releasing people that are simply a danger to the community right now, and the court dates are so far off in the future. I can't imagine they're just going to cease their criminal activity while they wait for their court date 3 months down the road.
Well, I know it's a different issue than what we're talking about today, but that deeply concerns me. And I think maybe we need to be talking about that as a board at some point, because we're going to have problems cropping up in our neighborhoods. And I've always believed that our number one priority is to keep our neighborhoods safe, keep people safe. And I think that it sounds like we're going to have an increase in criminal activity. I don't know how you cannot if you've got all these criminals out there. And the examples that you gave, Mike, that scares the heck out of me. But back to the issue at hand, how are you going to operate Rock Mountain if we did this?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and we will have to come back to this board for funding in subsequent years to address staffing. But I think it's important to remember, right now, we have zero capacity to move inmates around within the system. So in other words, if George Bailey went down, they had a catastrophic failure, similar to what they had a couple of years ago at George Bailey when all power to the Mesa was temporarily cut off due to a construction accident. It cost us $200,000 to bring in a portable generator for 1 month to provide power to the Mesa. If for some reason there was a plumbing failure or something we couldn't work around, we have no place to put them. We would simply have to depopulate our system in order to address that problem.
And is the money budgeted for those renovations of the other facilities that you talked about?
I'll have Mr. Thibodeau address that.
George Bailey does have some appropriations. We are currently in design. Vista has some money in appropriations as well, primarily in design for their integrated electronic security system to move that project forward to a future point when we actually understand the true scope and cost of the major renovations. We do know that George Bailey's need, it's almost an identical facility, will be similar in terms of scope and cost with escalation. And unlike Rock, which has been unoccupied, Bailey has been in constant use for 20-plus years and has significant wear and tear. But those projects are moving forward in a design phase, but not to the point where we can come to the board with a definitive total in appropriations and request that we go out for procurement of a general contractor.
So we're still going to be looking at additional money then in years out for the renovations of those two facilities.
We will, Supervisor, and the intent would be after Rock Mountain to be able to have a phased approach with other facilities like Bailey and Vista, because we would now have adequate bed space to house population and allow us to make a slower, much more methodical approach to the other facilities. But right now, we just do not have adequate flexibility and system to begin even the Rock project, in order to begin the Rock project.
My last question, do you see any changes in this no bail or a turnaround and that ultimately would increase your jail population?
I anticipate the zero bail will be reversed after probably 30 to 60 days after the governor's executive orders expire. That's what we're hoping for.
And do you see an uptick in the jail population at that time?
Oh, absolutely.
I would think so, but I wanted to hear it from you.
Right, and we bring the issue up of the zero bail. I think it's very clear that that's not good for public safety, but we bring that up to show that's why we can't maintain our jail population at 3,700. If we could, and there'd be no harm to public safety, we might be able to do some of these renovations and move inmates around. But we know that population can't stay that low. It's just not good for this county.
Now, Mr. Chairman, we're in kind of a pickle here because we just had the report on our budget situation from what we know right now. But on the other hand, I think we have to do this. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I think it's important to do this. And I'd ask our CAO, how could we do it? Could that be a part of the $134 million?
Supervisor Jacob, we would certainly bring that forward if the board wanted to do that, and we might have to go a little bit deeper in our reserves to do that, but we have sufficient reserves, as you saw, if you allow us to go a little bit deeper into that 2-month reserve. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I would support putting this in the budget next year, but I'd like to hear how my colleagues feel about this too.
I'll take a stab at it. I think I agree with the sheriff. I think, the concern about having adequate and safe detention facilities is a priority for the county. Public safety has always been the highest priority, I think, and right now, obviously, public health is probably the highest priority also. I'm sympathetic to the need of the sheriff. What I was going to suggest is maybe we could see if there's other items that maybe supervisors would like to see possibly included. Maybe we could make a list and refer those to the chief administrative officer to take a look at when we deal with the actual budget in July and August of this year. I've got a couple of projects that I think I'd like to put on that list for consideration. And there may be others that other supervisors have, and we could kind of evaluate those based on the best information we have at that time. We know we're going to get some additional money from the state, to hopefully cover some of the COVID-19 expenses. And I think that would give us an opportunity to look at hopefully a limited number of projects with, supporting rationale why they should be considered.
Mr. Chairman, it's Helen. I just want to make sure you understand that the COVID money that we may be getting may not be used for these types of expenses. Thank you.
Oh, I understand that, but I think, we're covering a lot of the expenses. We've covered a lot of the expenses with general fund money up to this point, realizing probably some of that will be able to be directed to COVID's expenses that are eligible to be covered. And I could be wrong on that, but that's my understanding. If we spent money for COVID-related expenses up to this point, some of this money is, I believe, can be used to cover those costs that we've incurred. Am I incorrect in that?
Mr. Chairman, remember, a lot of the money that we've been using on COVID up until getting the CARES Act is money from HHSA that is qualified and only used for public health and realignment types of purposes. So we'd have to look carefully at that. Remember, public safety is typically out of your general fund money, so we would be looking at the reserves to cover those expenses. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I've got two projects I'd like to bring up for consideration, and I realize everybody's going to have different things that they're disappointed in seeing either delayed or paused. One of the projects is on page 5 of 7, the Sweetwater Loop Trail. It's at the bottom of that page. There's $400 that is included in the capital fund already that I don't think will be needed because that money was going to be used to purchase easements on properties that the county is actually in the process of acquiring through MSCP funding. So that $400,000 is to the best of my knowledge, not going to be needed because we will not need to acquire easements. We will actually purchase the property, and we're already, I think, budgeted to use MSCP money to buy that. What I would like to do is to take that $400,000 and add an additional $600,000, which would allow us to complete the Sweetwater Loop Trail segments 5 through 7. The rationale for that is Supervisor Jacob and I have been working for the last probably close to 20 years with the Sweetwater Authority to get their concurrence to allow us to put a trail around their reservoir. Just tail end of last year, we got their concurrence to allow us to do that. And I think there's some need for expediency to try to get those two segments done. Plus there's a staging area at Lakeview that is included in that $1 million allocation. And again, about $400,000 of the $1 million that's needed for that project can be directed or redirected from money that will not be needed to purchase an acquisition. The second item is on the next page, page 6 of 7, the Bicycle Skills Park in the Otay Valley Regional Park. It's about a $1 million project. $500,000 of it was already budgeted for and is covered. And the staff recommendation is to fund the second $500,000 in fiscal year 21-22. On that project, we've been working very closely with the city of Chula Vista, and this is somewhat unique. This is the Otay Valley Regional Park is a joint powers authority between the city of Chula Vista, the city of San Diego, and the county of San Diego. And this particular project is one that we worked on an agreement with the city of Chula Vista that we will fund the construction of that bicycle skills park, and then they will take on the ongoing obligation to operate and maintain the bicycle skills park. The property is actually located in the city of well, it's kind of ironic. The property is actually in the city of San Diego, but it's owned by the city of Chula Vista. So it's been a very collaborative process involving all three agencies, and there's very strong support among all three agencies. And I would hope to be able to include that last $500,000. So that project could get under construction. I think design is all done, and I think it's about ready to go out to bid if we can get the additional funding. So I would like to see those items included in the CENA for fiscal year 2021. Are there additional comments? I think Supervisor Desmond, did you have your hand up?
Yes. I guess I wasn't prepared to add on any extra projects today. I would make a motion that we, for the renovation of the Rock Mountain Detention Center, that we move the money from 2021 to 2020, the 19.3 million. I think the longer we wait, the more expensive that's going to get and the more it's going to cost. And I think, so I'll make a motion that we move those dollars. Unfortunately, it has to come out of reserves right now. And it sounds like any other projects that we add on here are going to have to come out of reserves. But safety is our number one matter that we should always pay attention to. So I'll go ahead with that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, that's to add it to the list, or to include the staff recommendations, or just to add that to the recommendations?
Well, add that to the recommendations to move that. I guess I understood it was 19.3 million they need in 2021 to continue the work on it. And it's from the 2022. So I'm not sure where, I guess add it to the staff recommendations for at this time. Okay.
So we have a motion by Supervisor Desmond, seconded by Supervisor Jacob, to add that to the recommendations on SENA projects. Is there any further discussion? All right, would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you. Chairman Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Jacob?
Aye.
Supervisor Gaspar?
Aye.
Supervisor Fletcher? Aye. Vice Chairman Desmond?
Aye.
Chairman Cox, that motion passes unanimously with all board members being present and voting aye.
Okay, and I'll make a stab at it. I would like to add the two projects that I mentioned, adding $600,000 to the to the Sweetwater Loop Trail system by virtue of moving some of the money that was previously allocated for easement purchase, and also $500,000 for the Bicycle Skills Park in Chula Vista because of the work and collaboration that's been going on. And I would make that as a motion to add that to the recommendations.
I'll second it. Go ahead.
No, I was going to add one thing that I would like us to consider moving forward. I understand we have limitations in terms of what we're doing. The Third Avenue Behavioral Health Hub is a very expensive project that is rightfully going to be out a little bit. It's also a unique public-private partnership with UCSD and is kind of the anchor in our regional behavioral health system. And I would just make a motion for $2 million just to allow the planning and work to continue. We're already demolishing that site. UCSD wants to continue working with us as a partner. We know that it will be delayed, but we don't want to lose the momentum and energy that we have. And there's considerable savings on the Live Well Center in Southeast, because as we redesign that, we're looking at a much smaller footprint because of telework opportunities and other things that are going on there. And so there will be significant savings from that project that I think allow us to make a very modest investment. We don't want to lose the momentum that we've had on behavioral health. We don't want to lose this as an anchor. We don't want to lose our partnership with UCSD. And so I think $2 million there can be more than accounted for in the reduction in the total cost of the Live Well Center Southeast. So I'd like to add that to the staff recommendation list.
Okay. I think I made a motion, and I think Supervisor Jacobs seconded that. Do you want to include?
Well, I would second it. Actually, I have a whole list of projects that are on pause, as you could well imagine. However, I was willing to hold the line, but since Mr. Chairman, you kind of opened it up, and then we've got Supervisor Fletcher. I'm willing, and well, I'm sure Jim will get to you. Sure. I'm willing to pile on. So I've got a Rancho San Diego Library expansion, 1.4 million, and that has been in the works early 2018. And for some reason, it just sat somewhere, and it should not have. And it should have been funded in a prior year's budget, like a year or so ago. So I would ask that that be added in, since we're piling on here.
What's
if I could add in here, I don't think we should be piling on at all today. We just got a presentation of how much money we don't have. We move money over for the sheriffs for their jail. you know, this, to me, this is not good government that we all just throw things out. I mean, maybe we should have this discussion with Helen to see what monies we really have. But, you know, I just don't think this is the right time to be doing this, particularly with the COVID. And, you know, we're piling on projects that, you know, I'm not going to support, I guess, any additional piling on. I think we should hold this conversation for another meeting, another date and time.
Supervisor Dustin, I totally agree with those comments. Echo it 100%.
Well, that's kind of why I suggested at the beginning, maybe if we could provide a list of potential projects to be considered in conjunction with the budget once we have a better idea of where things are. I certainly can support that. I think there's probably legitimate projects in each district that, you know, maybe a modest amount of money could move the ball on, and that maybe that would be a better way to deal with it. I mean, we've included the 19.3 million for the sheriff, and I'm certainly supportive of that. I think some of the other projects we've mentioned, including the two that I mentioned that only total 1.1 million compared to a couple of the other projects that were brought up, maybe we could refer those to the chief administrative officer to take a look at in conjunction with the full budget deliberations.
If that's the motion, if that's the motion to refer it to budget, to have the CAO take a look at to see if there's a way to fund these projects, then, you know, I'll second the motion. But just to fund them, as I said earlier, I was willing to hold the line on all of mine that, and I've got quite a list here in front of me. But I mean, you've opened the gates, Mr. Chairman, and I'm not going to let my constituents down on a project, and probably the others may feel the same. I don't know if Helen can come up with a way to do that or not, but we're not saying fund it. We're saying refer to budget, and then we'll take a look at it in the context of the whole budget. Is that correct?
That would be my suggestion.
Okay. I'll second the motion based on that then.
All right, well, I guess I'm trying to figure out who, did I make the motion?
Yes, you did.
Okay, so we have modified the staff recommendation. The motion I would make now is to accept the staff recommendations as modified, including the 19.3 million for the sheriff, and to ask the CAO to look at other projects that supervisors may want to raise issue with for possible consideration in the final budget deliberations.
Mr. Chair, just do the motion as an additional recommendation rather than amending what you've already done, because you don't want to ask for reconsideration of what you've already done. Just do a
yeah, as modified. Okay, correct. Is that acceptable to the seconder of the motion?
Well, I'm not clear. So does that mean that we can refer whatever we want to budget now outside of the meeting?
Well, I think we can talk to the CAO, and those items that are on the CINA that are partially funded or not funded or something we can certainly deal with as we look at the budget and see, you know, where we are in June and July and August.
I can't support that because I don't know what that really means. I don't know what projects we're referring to the CAO to budget. And I'm not going to vote on something that I don't know what we're referring to budget.
Okay, do you want to mention specific projects then?
I thought we just did 3.
Oh, okay, I'm happy to refer those to the CAO to consider for funding and include that in the motion. Is that acceptable to the seconder?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Again, my preference would not to put any additional projects into the budget, but
Second.
You open the floodgates, and I'm gonna, on behalf of my constituents, I'm gonna put one of mine in. So, and Supervisor Fletcher put one of mine in, but I can't support just opening it up, not knowing what we're referring. If we're referring to 3, I'll second that.
Okay.
I'm going to substitute motion that we don't do any more delving into the CINA projects here now. We talk to the CAO later offline, give her our list, and you know, see what comes out or what she can make work. That's my substitute motion. We don't put anything for any projects off of the SENA before the CAO today until we all have the opportunity to talk with the CAO.
Supervisor Desmond, does that include the sheriff's request?
No, we already voted on that. That's done. So the sheriff's request to me is a done deal. This is just on anything else piling on.
Thank you.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second the motion, or the substitute.
All right.
Now, I'll speak to the substitute motion. I don't like backroom deals. I think whatever we refer to budget, it needs to be done in an open meeting and not behind closed doors. And just opening it up for all of us to talk to the CAO, to throw in whatever we want to throw in, that really reeks of a backroom deal. It reeks of a lack of transparency in our process, and I can't support that. And I'm really kind of surprised. If we're going to do it, let's do it now or at a subsequent meeting.
And that's, I hear what you're saying, but I think it's ridiculous. I've sat here quietly, as you know, on the SENA. Very few projects belong in District 3. I recognize the difficult situation that we're in and the impossible task being handed to our staff to make all of these numbers work. I didn't come here to promote pet projects from my district. I would bring forward all of them then that are on the D3 list. I was trying to be a good team player here. Nobody wants to do backroom deals. I'm the one that wants to do everything in public, including this. So if we need to come back and continue this item, that's fine. But I just wasn't prepared to come forward with 1 or 2 or 3 requests specific to my district on this item today. I think we have to all work together and not just look out for our own districts in all of this. We are San Diego County Supervisors. We have a significant challenge in front of us here, and we have to work together as a team. I don't support a backroom deal.
And I had no intention of making this any sort of a backroom deal or transparency. Whatever we did would have to come back through an open process. So that was not my intention at all.
Well, look, the SENA has been on the board agenda. It appears that 3 of us were prepared and have taken a look at projects that were important to us. So I don't know why the 2 of you had a problem today and you didn't pick out something that was important. And because you never know what's going to happen at a board meeting, so you need to be prepared.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
Excuse me. How about if we ask the CA, let's go ahead and take action on the item before us now. Let's ask the CAO to identify if there's any potential additional funding for SENA projects that she can identify by the last meeting in June, and to ask supervisors to prioritize a limited number of projects that they would like to see included should there be funding available, and we could do that at the last meeting in June.
That would be appropriate.
Would that be acceptable to the, I guess, I don't think we'd need the substitute motion if people would be willing to do that.
I think that works, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I think that works for me.
Well, Supervisor Desmond, are you okay with that? And if so, do you want to withdraw your motion? We would be taking action on what is before us now, including the $19.3 million from the SENA, and then we give some further direction to staff to come back, see if there's any additional money they can identify for capital improvement projects, and ask supervisors to submit a priority of projects that they would like to see included if there's funding available.
Well, that's essentially what I meant to say in the motion. Apparently, I wasn't very clear. I was pretty upset the fact that we're just piling on here at the end of a long day, and it wasn't appropriate in my mind. But I'm fine with that direction for moving forward and doing as you said, Supervisor Cox. Thank you.
Well, you're a wise man, Supervisor, so thank you for your consideration. I appreciate that.
And I'm so prepared that I've already had these discussions with Helen, so it'll make our meeting short, and I'm happy to withdraw the second.
All right, very good. So we have a motion then to approve the recommended CMIF with the one correction we've already made. If there's no further discussion, I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
We already,
Chairman Cox,
Aye.
Supervisor Jacob,
Aye.
Supervisor Gaspar,
Aye.
Supervisor Fletcher,
Joyfully, aye.
Vice Chairman Desmond.
aye.
Chairman Cox, that motion passes unanimously with all board members being present and voting aye.
Very good. Well, we've had a very long day, so we will adjourn to the Board of Supervisors meeting tomorrow on Wednesday, May 20th. That'll be for our normal land use hearing, and then we will have a we'll do our adjournments in memory tomorrow, and we'll have a closed session to complete the day. Hopefully, it'll be a little shorter than today was. If there's no further business to come before us today, we will stand adjourned.